After the young woman was struck by an ability, she had to be hospitalized. Her brother monitored her condition, regretting everything that had happened, since he had hidden from her an ability that would have given her the chance to reach the skies. He told her that he had also awakened an ability, and now he could take other people's abilities. He was also evaluating her ability, which was ranked D but very special. He thought that if she had been stronger, she wouldn't have turned into an ice statue so quickly. While he was talking to his sister, he heard their father arguing at the reception. The lawyer was trying to explain to the father that heroes sometimes make mistakes, but Fay Fay's father didn't want to talk, let alone make a deal. The man was left speechless when he saw the father throw the document onto the floor. That was when the protagonist quickly picked up the document to analyze the proposal. He told his father that, given his sister's condition, they needed money. He noticed that his father hadn't considered the cost of the medications and other expenses. The protagonist wanted to add a few more conditions before signing the agreement. Hearing the mediator, he wanted to know what those conditions were. The protagonist wanted Bing Chuan-yang, the hero who had harmed his sister, to apologize. Quick as a fox, the lawyer said that he and the Kunlun company would apologize on behalf of the hero. He added that an A-rank hero's schedule was extremely busy. When the protagonist heard that they were willing to pay 100 kin compensation, he handed over the signed document. As he left the hospital, the negotiator informed him that everything had been settled for just 100k. The hero was pleased that lawyer Wang had managed to take care of everything with only 100k. After ending the call, the lawyer muttered to himself that heroes cheated. As the protagonist resumed talking to his sister, he asked her not to be upset that he had signed. He also said that some awakened individuals weren't qualified to be called heroes. To make his plans easier, he left his home in the Mingyu community. Upon arriving with his luggage, the protagonist encountered his new roommates. The two of them were very kind, introduced themselves, and asked for his name. The protagonist of this story is named Yang Exi, and he is a journalist intern. A blonde roommate wanted to celebrate such a pleasant moment. The other young woman, Xiao, thought it was a great idea. It could be before she went to the library. The newcomer declined as he was tired and wanted to rest a bit. As soon as he entered the room, he lay down on the bed and started browsing his phone. He analyzed footage of a battle between heroes and monsters, as it was very popular. There were also many videos explaining different abilities. He didn't understand how all of this had happened just because of a black hole that appeared out of nowhere. Now people with supernatural talents could be called heroes. There was a book called The Law of Abilities to prevent malicious hunters from misusing them. He found the video where his sister was injured by a hero. He watched the video multiple times but couldn't find anything suspicious. He was surprised by the time when he noticed it was already 2:30 a.m. He went to the bathroom, wanting to brush his teeth and take a shower. But he found something unusual ahead. One of his roommates seemed to have had a few drinks. She walked past him, and when he said hello, she didn't even look at him. She asked to use the bathroom first if he didn't mind. The girl felt a bit nauseous and had to use the bathroom first. She was in such bad shape that, after leaning over the toilet, she fell asleep right there. The protagonist, concerned, asked if she was okay and if he should help her. He didn't want any misunderstandings, so he knocked on the other roommate's door, asking her to help. The young woman, still half asleep, asked why he wasn't in bed yet. He asked her to help their friend since it wouldn't be appropriate for him to do so. The girl said leaving her there wasn't a problem, as it wasn't the first time this had happened. After saying she had to work the next day, she simply closed the door. Returning to the bathroom, he asked the girl if she could stand up. He apologized in advance and lifted her in his arms. While doing so, he managed to detect an ability and realized she was an awakened one. The young woman's ability was ranked F, and he also noticed that she wasn't aware of it. But unfortunately, he was going to take that ability, and in the future, he would find a way to make it up to her. The ability Big Overclocking had already been successfully acquired. The protagonist now had two abilities in his possession, both mental, and he decided he would fuse them together. The fusion of abilities was completed, becoming a class ability of the Superbrain. He thought that if he used that ability to analyze Fay Fay's video, he might find some clue. After that, he decided to sleep, but was alerted by someone knocking on his door. It was the young woman from the previous night returning his coat. He looked at her and could hardly believe she was the drunk girl from the night before. Since he had removed her powers, he wanted to know if she was in good health and comfortable. The young woman said that she was already used to it and that he didn't need to worry. He said that was good, and while they were talking, someone entered. They were looking for the protagonist. It was a tall and burly young man. He was upset that the protagonist had hidden his relationship. He asked if he was dating and hadn't even told him. The protagonist asked the young man not to talk nonsense, saying that she was just his roommate. The chubby young man lamented that he had too much money and could afford an apartment all to himself. After that, he introduced himself to the young lady and said he was Yang's colleague. She returned the greeting and said her name was Lin. Payne didn't miss the opportunity and offered his abilities to the young woman. However, the protagonist said that his friend was only there so they could go to the newspaper together. Upon arriving at the Lucane newspaper, the protagonist began his analysis with his new abilities. There was a part that seemed strange to him, but he couldn't analyze it properly because his friend arrived right away. He asked why the protagonist hadn't made a move on such a beautiful girl. Running off, he said that if the protagonist didn't want her, he would definitely go for it. Yang said that they were just roommates and he didn't overthink things. The two were talking when suddenly someone screamed that there were monsters. Fan Pang immediately went to the window to see what was happening. It was a single-eyed jellyfish, and everyone there was terrified of the monster. It was announced that the monster was level B, and civilians were urged to take shelter. Quickly, the hero SAR Spicy appeared to save the city. He was a rank B hero, and everyone who saw him was pleased with his arrival. Everyone knew that the giant one-eyed jellyfish had strong defenses and a powerful counterattack. Fan Pang was talking to a friend without realizing that he had already fled. The young man, who had the talent of taking pictures with just a glance, thought he would shine once again. Another hero arrived, ranked C. It was Flame Butterfly, offering her help in capturing the monster. The other hero thanked the young woman for her offer. That monster hunt was being broadcast on the hero's channel. It was also going to be discussed by a pair of commentators. They thought the hero was inefficient because he needed to eat before activating his power. That gave time for other heroes to inflict major damage on the monster. The live broadcast would continue. The hero jumped at the monster, but he seemed to be at a great disadvantage. The heroine told him to dodge using his flames, like butterfly wings. She managed to inflict some damage on the monster using her flaming butterflies. The commentators believed that the monster's life was already low, nearing its end. There were differing opinions. Some thought the monsters were intelligent and were just pretending. The two heroes waited for the effect of the flame attack. After the fire was extinguished, the one-eyed jellyfish appeared almost unscathed. The young heroine saw that the monster had great resistance. They wondered if the hero would be able to hold the monster off until more heroes arrived. The hero remembered that he had been warned that he could not afford a single defeat. Otherwise, he would lose the top position in the company. The protagonist was secretly observing the two. He noticed when the hero put a strange pill in his mouth. The protagonist had never seen a blue pill like that anywhere before. Meanwhile, the flame butterfly had been caught by one of the jellyfish's tentacles. She pleaded with the other hero to save her life. In the live broadcast, there were many comments making it clear that no one had much faith in that hero. The monster was squeezing the young heroine tighter and tighter. She didn't want her end to come in its hands. She was rescued by her partner, the hero fighting alongside her. That turnaround gave an extra boost to his followers. The hero's supporters were pleased because they saw that he hadn't aged. It was no secret that the other commentator had little faith in him. The situation changed with every move. They were determined to show the battle of the hero SAR Spicy. The commentators said they would follow the fight until the very end, but the hero, after taking the pill, was different, and he charged at the monster with full force, attacking. His attack seemed powerful, but so did the monster's reaction. The pill seemed to have an adverse effect, which was why he started coughing uncontrollably. The young heroine could only see her companion crouched down and coughing. The veins on his face were bulging, which startled his companion as she approached. When she got closer, she asked what was happening, but he couldn't respond. When he finally managed to control everything, he smiled and said he had just used too much strength. The fans were shouting that this hero was very reliable. The protagonist thought it was over and needed to organize the news once he got back. However, when he looked at the jellyfish, he saw something else. It was a small clone of the jellyfish, looking around. It was heading toward the protagonist. He thought that since it had high physical strength, perhaps his mental strength would be enough. The jellyfish wanted revenge against that hero as soon as it found a host. Looking at the protagonist, it thought that young human male looked quite appetizing. Yang thought that since it had just fought, it must be weak, and it was good that his ability could handle the job. Luckily, his ability was enough to knock out the small beast. The young heroine noticed that someone was using abilities. He was lucky that it was just a small and weak clone. Otherwise, his ability wouldn't have been enough. He held it in his hands and decided he would keep its ability too. When configuring the ability core in his hands, he noticed it was a B-class ability. It was like an invisible shield covering the entire surface of the body. But he knew that no matter how strong an ability was, it would still have weaknesses. The young blazing butterfly wanted to know who was using abilities in that area. Yang hid, as it wasn't time for him to be discovered yet. When she touched the ground, she found it strange because she felt a surge of mental energy in that place. A masked person stepped out of the alley, asking if she was looking for him. She asked if he was the one who had used an ability just now. The masked person, wearing a cloak, replied that yes, he was the one who had used it. She wanted to know if he was also a hero because she thought she had seen him before. The man said he was just passing by and happened to help finish the job. The young woman was startled when she saw the clone of the monster that had just been eliminated. She thought that man must be strong for having taken down the monster so quickly. But she also knew he shouldn't have used power since he didn't have permission, as he wasn't a hero. He asked the young woman to let him pass. Her answer was a firm no. She held out her hand and said she couldn't do that. Since he had used powers illegally, he now had to follow her to the association. The protagonist started laughing at her and asked if she thought she could stop him. The young heroine, angry, ignited in flames and said he had violated the ability code. Pressing one of the heroine's flaming butterflies, he asked if this was how they treated humans. Now it was his turn to attack. She saw that things weren't looking good and quietly slipped away. After seeing a hero ingesting the blue pill, the protagonist understood what had happened to his sister. Taking off his mask, he realized that the ice hero had also taken a pill that day. Inside the subway, he thought he needed to take a break from using his ability for a few days. He needed to explore and understand the super brain ability. He also needed to consolidate the information he found about the blue medication. While thinking about this, he didn't notice that someone was taking his backpack. He reached to his side and realized someone had stolen it. Inside that backpack, he had stored the Raiden costume he had used in the alley. He suspected it might have been the guy who passed by him, but he didn't see where he went. He thought it could be a camouflage ability, and that the scent of the bag led to the man with purple hair. But his mannerisms and clothes were completely different. He figured it must have been an instant transformation, and a free ability like that would be very useful. The thief thought the day's reward was great, but suddenly he felt a terrifying aura and wondered why. Looking back, he saw Yang Lao and wondered when he had been discovered. He started running as fast as he could, complaining that this day had been awful. Quickly, he dashed into a public restroom ahead. Yang Lao followed him and told him to come out of hiding. But when he looked inside the restroom, there was no one there. He wondered if the man had gone into the women's restroom. Already inside the women's restroom, Yang Lao called out, saying he knew where he was hiding, but all he got in response was a scream. He quickly kicked the bathroom door open and entered. But as soon as he did, several objects were thrown at him. Covered in paper, he muttered that the man's ability was indeed impressive. It could even change his voice. Dressed as a woman, the man with purple hair said he was giving up and would return the backpack. Yang Lao said it was a shame he couldn't change his appearance. Sighing, the man agreed with Yang Lao, and he hurried to return the backpack. Handing over the backpack, he said he was giving everything back. Yang Lao looked inside and saw that his clothes were still there. He asked the man if he had seen what was inside, to which the man quickly replied that he hadn't. Believing him, Yang Lao told him to find a job and become a good person. The man said he would never steal again and thanked him for letting him go. But Yang Lao responded that he never said he would let him go. In deep shock, the man could only tremble. After taking the man's ability, Yang Lao said he couldn't resist these chances to get free abilities. He changed into a black suit and headed out of the bathroom. Upon leaving, he encountered police officers who asked if he had heard anything inside. Yang Lao replied that he had, and that he saw a strange woman in the bathroom. Seeing the police take away the man dressed as a woman, he commented that some people didn't deserve to have powers. 1 week later, a taxi stopped in front of a club. Yang Lao stepped out of the taxi, having come to meet his friend. When they met, he asked why he had called him to that place. His friend asked him to guess who he had found at the club. Yang Lao asked who, and his friend quickly replied that it was Yang Lao's girlfriend and that she was working as a pole dancer. Yang Lao said she wasn't his girlfriend, but his friend told him to stop pretending, and together they entered the club. Once inside, his friend showed him what he had discovered. His roommate was inside a cage performing. Her performances were remarkable. The young woman's face saddened when she saw her roommate. However, the two of them passed by without looking at her at any moment. Fan Peng said that tonight, the bill was on him, so Yang Lao should enjoy himself. He called over some girls to join them for fun. 3 girls came, and he introduced them to Yang Lao. Fan Peng also introduced his friend to the girls. Soon, all the girls approached Yang Lao, but he didn't seem very happy. In the booth next to them, a man told another that if it weren't for his brother, he wouldn't have lost the race. Lei Hu said it was just a race and that he shouldn't blame others. Instead of getting upset, the man laughed. Liu Yuan said that he couldn't be on his father's side while also working as his bodyguard. He asked Liu Hu if he couldn't even speak, but Liu Hu replied that it must be hard for a normal person to be restrained by rank C. Liu Yuan, with anger in his eyes, looked at him, but he gave up and slapped his companion while asking what she was doing. He asked what kind of wine that was, and said he couldn't drink something so bad. After that, he grabbed the bottle and poured all the wine over his companion's head. Seeing the situation, Yang Lao wanted to step in, but he was warned that the man wasn't normal. Yang Lao said he knew, and that he was just going to the bathroom. On the floor, the companion sat, sad and soaked in wine. Liu Yuan said that in that club, she should know the rules and told her that if she drank all the wine there, he would let her go. One of his bodyguards helped her drink the wine, even though she didn't want to. Suddenly, he was kicked away by a masked man. Beside the man wearing a raven mask was the companion, lying on the floor. The man said he had heard that Liu Yuan was Jeek C's son. The rank C bodyguard asked who he was, and if he was just there to cause trouble. He replied that he only wanted to make a deal with Liu Yuan. Liu Yuan asked what kind of deal he wanted to make. Liu Hu said it was late and they should head back. But Liu Yuan didn't like that and threw a wine bottle at him. Enraged, the bodyguard glanced at him, but unconcerned, Liu Yuan asked the masked man if he wanted to do business with him. The bodyguard told Liu Yuan to sit down because he was too drunk, and added that he would handle it and take care of the masked man. The masked man asked if he wanted to fight and said he didn't like violence. Even so, someone was about to learn a lesson. The bodyguard wasn't willing to let it slide. Wrapping his hand in bandages, Liu Hu said he would show who was going to lose. He activated his ability, causing his hands to be covered in flames, and said that the masked man was unlucky. The masked man thought that his opponent had a C-rank fire element ability. The people around him believed he was bold for provoking a disciple of an A-rank hero. While still hearing the conversations in the background, the bodyguard rushed to attack the masked man. As he charged toward his target, he wondered why the masked man wasn't even dodging. Dodging at the last second, the masked man asked if that was all he had. But Liu Hu responded that since becoming a hunter, no one had ever endured his abilities. He launched a powerful burst of fire at the masked man. The spectators were in disbelief at everything that was happening. The masked man, already engulfed in flames, remained standing still, until he easily dispersed the fire, shocking Liu Hu, who then wondered if the masked man wasn't even slightly injured. But as soon as he stepped out of the fire, the masked man activated his mental blast ability, which left the bodyguard frozen and unconscious. The masked man struck the bodyguard's neck, who immediately collapsed unconscious on the ground. Liu Yuan, terrified, said that he was incredibly strong and had easily defeated his bodyguard. Activating his ability, the masked man took the ability of his defeated opponent. He then started walking toward Liu Yuan, who looked around and realized that the other bodyguards had already fled. Quickly, he asked what kind of deal he wanted and said that if it was about money, he would transfer it immediately. The masked man grabbed him by the neck, but Liu Yuan begged not to be eliminated and asked if he knew who his father was. The masked man made it clear that he didn't care who his father was. He said he didn't intend to eliminate him and asked if he wanted to know what the deal was about. He asked Liu Yuan if he wanted to have abilities. Liu Yuan, in shock, confirmed if they were really talking about abilities. The masked man released his neck, and he collapsed onto the ground. Already on the floor, Liu Yuan asked the masked man if he thought he was some kind of god who could grant whatever he wanted. The solution was simple. He just had to go to the location written on the paper in 7 days. After everything that happened, his friend called to make sure everything was going well. Yang Lao said that the club was too noisy, so he left. Fang Peng said he would explain what happened over a barbecue meal. His plan was progressing smoothly. Now he just needed to wait for Liu Yuan. At the Kunlun Hero Company, they were holding a meeting about the mysterious masked man. Jixi asked the others what they thought of the footage. Glacier Warrior responded that the masked man had defeated Liu Hu in seconds and said his ability must be B rank. Prodigal Swordsman questioned whether it was really an ability or if it had been a hidden blade that took down Liu Hu, and he pointed out that the moment the masked man raised his hand, Liu Hu had already lost. Demonic Dragon said they analyzed Liu Hu's injuries and asked them to take a look, but even he was surprised to learn that Liu Hu's ability had disappeared. Everyone else was also shocked by the information. Jixi said it looked like they had a major problem on their hands. The scared one wanted to know how the enemy was able to take someone else's abilities. The one with horns and red hair mentioned that the S-rank hero, Du Ren, had that kind of ability. The question was whether that person was doing the same thing. The blue-hair hero thought it was impossible, as that hero was already old, but the leader of the meeting believed they couldn't ignore the possibility. Meanwhile, the scared hero thought it was best not to report it yet, as it could be useful later. At the same time, the eldest among them thought that could be the company's secret weapon. At the luxurious mansion, the hero's son was thinking about the possibility of possessing abilities. However, he knew the man wanted something in return, but had no idea what it would be. Crushing the paper in his hand, he thought it wasn't a big deal. He believed that in a few days, he would have an ability, and nothing else would matter. At the museum, the protagonist invited his friend to go to the museum, using the excuse of learning more about monsters. The protagonist's chubby friend knew that, in reality, the women who visited the museum were beautiful. Trying to act serious, the protagonist said he was there to see the S-rank monster. He claimed he was gathering information for an article about the monster invasion. Looking at that monster, the chubby friend thought it looked incredibly powerful. However, the protagonist imagined that if he could steal that ability, it wouldn't be bad at all. Unlucky timing. Unfortunately for him, as he reached out to touch it, a police officer appeared. He quickly used the excuse that he was a reporter working on an article. The officer said he could let the item be looked at. It was allowed, but it couldn't be touched. The two were such good friends that they didn't need words. With just a look, the chubby one knew what to do. He distracted the officer with questions while his friend made contact, and when the protagonist managed to acquire another skill, he thought he could feel the skill because it took strength to obtain it. But once it was complete, he felt the great energy. However, he was shocked to see that it contained no information. Analyzing the skill, he noticed it was called plasma. He couldn't believe that such a powerful monster would have only weak abilities. He thought that maybe because the monster had been exposed for so long, it was gradually losing its strength. The protagonist believed that last time he was able to extract powers because the monster had just been defeated. He was frustrated, even though he was gaining a lot from the museum. Back home, he started analyzing the 3 skills he had obtained. Besides the plasma skill, he also had the control one. The power of the abilities had weakened to an extremely low level, but Prota, looking at the skill orbs, had an idea. He thought he could use the C-rank skill orbs to test something. The MC wanted to dismantle the abilities. He placed the orb in the palm of his hand to try and take it apart. After a while, there was a reaction. It began to crack. The message showed that the skill's downgrade was successfully completed. He now had a few black cubes on his desk. He concluded that it was dark energy and that perhaps the skills were formed from those tiny cubes. The young man began thinking that skills could be disconnected into low dark energy. If that was the case, he could use that dark energy to fuse and enhance the abilities. With that in mind, he started fusing one with a square of dark energy. The message showed the skill had been improved. Now it was an E-rank skill named Control, used to control other people. The protagonist was somewhat surprised. He figured he might even be able to create an S-rank skill someday. His thoughts were interrupted, as someone outside seemed to be having a serious problem. From the voice, it could be the friend who had gone looking for their roommate. The noise that suddenly bothered the protagonist came from outside. It was his roommate's father, accusing her of deceiving him. As the situation unfolded, the protagonist stepped out of his room to see what was happening. The friend's father said he had only helped her earn more money. The mother said the brother needed the money to buy a house, a car, and to find a wife. She felt used by her parents over an illness the father didn't even have. She just wanted them to stop. That situation made her deeply uncomfortable. She confessed that, in order to make the money quickly, she had to work day and night. The father, unconcerned, said it was all for the Lin family legacy. The young woman questioned her father, who said he would get the rest of the money by selling her to a stranger. The mother tried to calm the daughter, saying that the man, despite lacking education, had assets and values. When the man tried to touch the young woman, the mother said she wouldn't do anything and would let her suffer. The daughter said that to earn the money, she had to become an escort and make money for them. That news hit like a bomb, making the parents anxious. The father said he would never accept such shame because of his daughter. He raised his hand to teach her how to protect herself. Seeing the situation, the protagonist couldn't help but intervene. The man looked at the weak-looking young man, but the protagonist warned him not to interfere. He was just educating his own daughter. The protagonist observed that the father had no mercy, but the mother was clearly bothered by the situation. That's why he decided to use his control ability. This gave the mother the courage to put the girl's father in his place. She was angry about what they had done to their daughter and wouldn't let it happen again. The mother promised her daughter she would always take care of her. The father agreed to let the brother gather the money on his own. The protagonist thought about his sister. He knew everyone would do something for someone they love. The next day, at the train station, the young woman said goodbye to her departing parents. Her mother, at the train window, told her not to do anything stupid again. After they had left, the girl thanked the protagonist for accompanying her to the station. The young man hoped the new roommate's brother would be a responsible person. Playfully, she asked him to navigate her path with his charm. The protagonist, all shy, blushed, and when the cheeky girl got close and gave him a kiss on the cheek, things got even more awkward. She spoke softly in his ear, thanking him for saving her twice. After that situation, late at night, he was in a place where a large number of monster corpses were stored. The protagonist, dressed in his raven outfit, watched as a truck arrived. He decided to approach the truck, sneaking underneath it without being seen. The plan was to hide and gain access to the inner part of that warehouse. However, when he got under the truck, he realized he was also positioned close to a woman. She signaled for him to stay quiet. He noticed that she also wanted to infiltrate the manipulation center. With a limited space, their bodies were very close, causing some discomfort for the woman. Still very close to her body, he said it was a pleasure to meet her and that it was quite a coincidence. The young woman didn't think it was a coincidence. She believed she was just really unlucky for something like that to happen to her. Even so, she felt comfortable enough to introduce herself and mention which guild she belonged to. She warned that they were about to reach the delivery area, but she wouldn't be able to leave with him like that. That's when the protagonist told her to hold on to him tightly. Then the two of them jumped. After jumping, he protected her by landing on his back while she fell on top of him. Seeing that she took a moment to move away, he asked how much longer she planned to keep hugging him. Annoyed, she said she had no choice and that if she did, she wouldn't have hugged him. The two entered the monster manipulation area. She noticed that he was acting like someone who had never seen large-scale operations before, thinking he might be a rookie. Taking advantage of the situation, the protagonist said he was a novice and wanted her to take care of him. With that, she allowed him to follow her. Upon reaching a certain area, she mentioned that the boss wanted the fur of the white wolf. Handling the fur, she said it needed to be collected with great care. After that, she made a box appear and, smiling, said her power was like an inventory bag. Then she called him to the next area where more bodies were stored. He took the ability of that white wolf for himself. A message notified him that the ability was ranked D and its name was mental deformation. Suddenly, an alarm sounded. They had been discovered. Immediately, someone appeared. The man who arrived was sweating and terrified, screaming that the monster had come back to life. The information caught both of them off guard, and the situation only got worse when, apparently, the man was engulfed by something that looked like a giant black snake. The red-haired young woman had no idea what that thing was. Trembling, she leaned slightly on the protagonist for support. But what seemed like black tentacles quickly wrapped around the young woman's waist, pulling her away. He called out to her and decided he had to use a power to save her. The red-haired young woman called the protagonist by the false name he had given her, pleading for his help. However, he noticed that the tentacles were fast, so he ran in that direction. He also thought about how the place had some high-quality metal materials. Touching a D-rank object, he activated his metal element transformation ability, creating his own tentacles. The protagonist, with his raven-clad form, launched the tentacles toward the young woman to defend her. Seeing that he had succeeded, one of his tentacles broke, causing the young woman to fall to the ground. He asked if she was okay. She said the tentacles were strong enough to tear parts of her clothes. The question now was how that thing had revived. The protagonist said they would only know if they took a closer look. However, several people were emerging from the tentacle-covered monster, screaming for help. The red-haired young woman could hardly believe what she was seeing. The sight of the monster was disturbing, and it continued to lash its tentacles toward them. Once again, the protagonist used metal element transformation to defend against the tentacles. He created a protective barrier like a shield to block the monster's attack. The red-haired young woman warned that the shield was getting smaller and urged him to think of something fast. As he remained silent, she fell into complete despair, believing she was about to become a snack for the tentacle monster. The protagonist, keeping his composure, remembered seeing some fuel tanks nearby. He tried to calm the young woman, telling her not to worry because he had a solution for everything and would protect her. Targeting the monster and its tentacles, he manipulated the metals. He directed them toward the fuel tanks, hurling them all at the tentacles. After that, he ignited the tanks to cause an explosion. He told everyone who had managed to free themselves from the tentacles to run. He barely had time to escape with her as the monster pursued them. Before they were caught, they were protected by someone who arrived wielding a large sword. The two were once again surprised when they saw that old man standing in front of them. The old man, who had the air of a vigilant, wanted to know if they were the thieves and where the revived monster was. The red-haired young woman lost her patience and wanted to know why that old man was talking so much nonsense. To him, that young woman was nothing more than a disrespectful girl, and his words only made the young woman even angrier. The protagonist knew exactly who that man was. Years ago, he was the one who sealed away a great mutant beast. And even there, when talking to the old man, he said he would deal with them after handling the monster. Despite his age, the man was still an A-rank hero, and his sword style was impressive. The protagonist expected nothing less from a technique passed down through generations, the Northern Sword ability. The old man remained agile among the large monster's tentacles, saving himself with his dimensional slashes. The tentacle-covered monster charged at the old man. That man's final attack seemed to unleash a storm of waves worthy of admiration. With great style, the old man managed to conclude a brief battle against the tentacled monster. After that, he stood in front of the pair, as now it was their turn. The young man tried to tell the old man that they weren't the ones who had revived the monster. But it was all in vain, as the old man didn't believe a word they said, finding them suspicious. The red-haired young woman wanted to know if the guy in the vest could handle a fight against the old man. His response was clear. If he couldn't, she could take his place. The girl just wanted to hand over a cool piece of equipment. She handed over armor made from B-rank monsters and said it would be useful. When the protagonist saw that the young woman handed over the armor and took off, he noticed that she had the same personality as his sister. Meanwhile, the old man attempted to attack the protagonist, thinking he had his guard down. Naturally, the armor blocked the attack, proving to be very useful. As expected, the battle between them began. The protagonist wasted no time and activated Super Brain. Observing the old man's movements, he knew that this wouldn't be an easy fight. But after activating that power, his senses sharpened and the old man's attacks visibly slowed. The old man thought he had found an opening to strike. The protagonist realized he wouldn't be able to dodge in time. Acting quickly, he used his control ability to try to escape. With that, he was able to temporarily cancel the attack. The old man noticed that just as he was about to strike, his movements had been stopped. Because of that, he took a few steps back. Meanwhile, the protagonist was thinking that if the attack had landed, he would have been in serious danger. Frustrated, the old man warned that thieves with cheap tricks could only get this far. With that, the masked protagonist decided to switch elements. That was the only way he would have a chance to counterattack the old man. All the styles were strong, but control could at least restrict him a few times. The onlookers couldn't believe that the young man was capable of facing Duan Shu Liu. Hearing the nearby comments, some speculated that he might be the hero god Spear and became curious about his true identity. The old man, judging the young man's movements, started to believe he wasn't the thief. Then he told everyone to leave the area, except for the young man, because he needed to talk to him. When he saw that the others weren't obeying, he reminded them that they should respect the central director's authority. The red-haired young woman, without thinking too much, ran off, telling the protagonist she would wait for him outside. The old man told the masked man that his sword skills were average, but his control over the metallic attribute was similar to that of God Spear. It wasn't surprising to the old man that the masked figure possessed multiple abilities. He knew the young man hadn't come there just to steal some monster fur, and asked if he wanted to learn the truth about the world. The protagonist considered what the man was saying. Then, without hesitation, he stated that he was there to uncover the truth. The old man let out a hearty laugh. Young people were truly fascinated by the unknown, and he thought it was fine to share the information. He began explaining that the main reason the Monster Manipulation Center opened the portal to the monster world was something called the White Cavity. Those words made the protagonist somewhat skeptical. The old man continued, saying that 15 years ago, the White Cavity in the city had been successfully opened. At that time, the Hero Association sent an elite team to the monster world. The old man proudly said that he was one of the heroes in that operation. And now, the monster manipulation centers were constructing spatial weakness zones in the blue world. They only needed to keep burning energy, and they would have a chance to open the White Cavity once again. The protagonist, pointing at the revived monster on the ground, asked what it was. The old man explained that this happened simply because not everyone knew the details of monster mutations. The old man seemed tired, knowing that the humans of Earth were nothing more than cattle surrounded by monsters. Saying goodbye to the young man, he told him he could leave but should never forget that he was just a human. The supervisors of that company were upset because old Duan was already starting to cause problems. They knew he couldn't go around revealing plans to everyone, yet he still talked about it. One of them told the woman that even if the old man hadn't mentioned it, everyone would have found out eventually. There were already more than 25 seats in that room with voting power in the S-rank category. They discussed this while looking at a panel in the Hero Association's office in that city. The meeting to decide whether or not to contract White Cavity for other organizations would begin immediately. Elsewhere, the protagonist was visiting his sister, Fay Fay. Once again, he told her he had learned about a cruel reality. He thought about the previous night and his conversation with old Duan. He also knew he couldn't let outsiders find out about this. That's why that night he had to prevent the red-haired young woman from spreading his secret. When he asked her to look into his eyes, he used his control ability. He made her forget about the flame abilities and the metal element control, leaving her only with the memory that she had sold him an armor. After that, when he snapped his fingers, the young woman returned to normal without remembering what had happened. And since he had made her believe she had sold him an armor and still had money in her pockets, he had to run home. The protagonist recounted these things to his sister in the hospital, saying how much that young woman resembled her. He assured his sister that after he succeeded in his revenge, he would find a way to wake her up. After that, he returned home and started working on improving the metal element transformation. Using the suction star ring, he managed to create a medical unit. He would need this because he couldn't let others know about his abilities, and he planned to use it to deceive Liu Yuan. He produced masks for different occasions and abilities. He would use disguise transformation, and that disguise would be called Snake. And those abilities would be different from Yuji's. It would be the ability to unleash plasma bursts. He would be the masked man and create countless versions of himself to form a mysterious organization. He also had to consider the organization's recruitment fee, which would be paid by the young Master Liu. When the protagonist arrived at the designated location, he found Liu lying on the ground, napping. Seeing this, the masked man gave him a few nudges with his foot to wake him up. Startled but happy, Liu immediately apologized for falling asleep while waiting. The masked man was pleased to see that the young man had shown up with confidence. Clinging to the protagonist's legs, the young man said he was willing to trade anything for an ability. The protagonist, pushing him away with his foot, said he didn't need anything like that. These things were easy to obtain. Then he ordered the young man to look directly into his eyes. Being clever, the protagonist used his power on the man, Then he asked for information about the blue pill. However, the young man said nothing, which unsettled the masked man, because when he had used control on others, they had revealed everything they knew. This led him to conclude that the young man might already have an ability, using his mental blast ability to check if he really had one. It seemed like he didn't, since he had been easily controlled before. But further investigation was needed. The protagonist placed his hand on him and activated ability theft. He was shocked. This young man, who had been begging for an ability, already had one, and it was A rank. However, it was a difficult ability to detect because it only activated when the person died, granting them a second life. To the protagonist, this ability was an excellent trump card, so he decided to keep it. From that moment on, he would treat the young man better for having acquired his ability. After that, he decided to grant him an ability he had taken from a monster's body at the manipulation center. Seconds later, he asked the young man to wake up. All he knew how to do was beg for an ability. The masked man told him that it was fine to sleep since he was tired, but asked him to pay attention to something. With that, he showed him an accessory called the Suction Star Ring, which was made by the organization he belonged to. He explained that they used special methods to create Genesis abilities, allowing even normal people to acquire powers. Half in disbelief, the young man caught the medicine that the masked man tossed to him. The order was to drink it without hesitation. His first thought was that it could be poison, but if that were the intent, he would have been eliminated on other occasions. Needing to gain an ability, he didn't hesitate and drank all the liquid in the vial. Right after that, intense pain began to take over his mind and body. Smiling, the masked man told the young man that he would soon experience the incredible sensation of possessing an ability. With the feeling of the ability coursing through his body, he started to feel feverish. The protagonist was controlling the innate ability hobby, making it activate. The young man thought it was just a reaction to the medicine he had taken and gradually began to transform, until he turned into a massive muscular white wolf. The masked man explained to him that this type of blood allowed for a bodily transformation ability into a werewolf. The young man with that ability didn't even have the power to transform into a dragon. Looking at his enormous palm, he wondered if he was stronger than his brother. The masked man quickly informed him that his brother was A rank, while he was merely E rank. He also told the young man not to be so impatient, as the organization could only provide an F-rank medicine at best. The masked man thought that despite turning into a werewolf, the young man's eyes looked as cute as a husky's. He made it clear that only because of his good reputation within the organization, he was able to obtain an E-rank medication for him. Liu realized that the organization had abilities of all ranks, meaning that one day he could surpass his father. The werewolf was so pleased that he started clinging to the masked man, trying to obtain an A-rank ability. He insisted that the masked man at least let him treat him as a mentor. After that, he wanted to know what exactly the organization did. Sitting down, he listened as the masked man explained that the organization was called Judge and was created by a lord who had administrators. Liu, still in his white wolf form, wanted to know how he could become strong or even become the leader, considering how powerful the administrator was. The answer was simple and required no guessing, because the leader did not reveal himself easily. The massive white wolf kept pressing to know the fastest way to earn credits. His mission now was to use his identity as the young master of the Kunlun companies to gather information about the blue pill. It was explained to the young man that the blue pill enhanced abilities, which was why the masked man was in that city. Upon hearing that the pill strengthened abilities, the young white wolf was very pleased, only to have his hopes shattered when the masked man warned that heroes had already used the pill and harmed innocent people. That statement gave the young man a small wake-up call, making him just a little bit more aware. The young man was also curious to know which hero had made such a great mistake. His doubts were answered when the masked man revealed that it was an A-rank hero, Bing Chuan. Upon hearing the hero's name, Li Kenyang, who had already returned to his original form, was stunned. The masked man encouraged the young man, saying that after obtaining useful information, he would have another chance to improve his rank. And just as he was about to leave, he mentioned that he had forgotten to inform him of something. It was about the ability. It would only last for 1 week, the same amount of time he had to complete the mission. With this information, Liu was left speechless. After the meeting with young Liu, the protagonist continued sipping his drink. He saw a drawing of the masked man on a wanted poster, instructing people to contact Kuan Du Du. The shock was so great that he spit his drink all over a nearby waitress. He tore the poster down and kept examining it, unable to believe that the red-haired girl had done something like this. But he was also surprised to see that he was in the same place as her. He noticed that the girl was accompanied by 2 other people. Because of that, he decided to observe the situation more carefully. He realized that she was in the middle of a dispute with other individuals. One of the men wanted her to be more cooperative and hand over the sword to them. The girl played innocent, claiming she didn't know what they were talking about. Meanwhile, the men who looked like samurais were ordering her to tell the truth. The protagonist realized that a conflict was unfolding over a legendary weapon crafted from an S-rank monster. Meanwhile, the red-haired girl, who had no idea that the sword was actually valuable, seemed completely unfazed. Lying as much as possible, she insisted that they couldn't accuse her without any evidence. From a distance, the protagonist could tell that the girl wasn't even good at lying. The true owner of the sword, a black-haired woman, did not like what she was hearing. One of the samurais also lost his patience and decided to use the Santorio military style against the young woman. Another one, looking like a ninja, used the Shadow Jutsu clone style. The protagonist, watching from above, noticed that those two guys were ability users, both rank C. He also saw that his weak red-haired friend began to fight back using a B-rank weapon, the Weasel Scythe. She was so confident that she told them all to go to hell. The wind was initially terrifying. Trying to escape, she said she would never return the things she had taken. The rightful owner of the sword didn't like hearing that, and using her A-rank ability, Snow Queen, decided it was time to unleash her power. The cunning redhead realized that this was no joke. As the protagonist watched, determined to help, he used his disguise transformation ability to put on his masked black cloak outfit. Meanwhile, the Ice Queen was chasing the redhead, launching multiple ice spears. The ability called Blizzard Storm was cast to prevent the redhead from escaping. The masked man watched, fearing for his red-haired friend, as she was in serious trouble. The commotion caused by these fighters made reporters start broadcasting the battle. Meanwhile, the redhead was having a tough time at the hands of the Ice Princess, who only wanted her to return what didn't belong to her. The red-haired girl, with a sarcastic tone, stopped in front of her and asked which knife she had lost, the gold one or the silver one. That made the A-rank hero girl extremely irritated. In response, she decided to freeze the insolent redhead's feet. She told her it would be best to apologize and return what didn't belong to her. Even as things got harder for the redhead, she continued acting defiantly. Smart as she was, she had already noticed the masked man's presence, so she threw a sacred sword in his direction. For the masked man, it was no surprise that she had already sensed him. He noticed that the sword was nothing more than a broken tool, and wondered who would even want such a thing. The redhead agreed at first, thinking the same thing, but later realized it was something valuable. The ice heroine didn't like finding out that the redhead had allies. She ordered her samurais to deal with that unexpected situation. They tried to attack the masked man with their weapons. Meanwhile, the protagonist noticed that the strange sword had spiritual energy and was draining his energy. He also realized that he could no longer control his own body. It seemed like the sword had taken over his movements. His strikes were so precise that they hit some of the ninja clones. However, seeing that they were just clones, the protagonist realized he was in a tight spot. One of the enemies charged at him from behind, but he turned around just in time to block the attack. The young woman, the owner of the demon blade Muramasa, noticed that the sword was acting differently. One of the ninjas pleaded for her help, but it was already too late. Their ability had been absorbed. It was a C-rank ability called Santorio. At that moment, he thought his mental energy would be completely drained, leaving him unable to hold on for much longer. Even so, the ice heroine kept launching her abilities at him. Things were getting so intense that the masked man considered using his rebirth ability. The abilities being used were on another level, and even normal people could sense that. The protagonist, looking up, saw that there was an air barrier, and the situation got worse when the fighters realized that the hero Wanderer Swordsman would also join the battle. Dragon arrived and immediately sided with the Sakura group, which believed their territory extended to Area 6. The ice heroine made it clear that she only wanted her belongings back and wouldn't back down from intimidation. The redhead quickly claimed that she had bought the sword from the ice heroine's master. The snow-powered girl was now worried. There were 2 more A-rank ability users in the area. Without hesitation, she launched her powers at the redhead, proving she wasn't afraid of anyone. As she did so, she looked at Dragon and said that if she got her belongings back, she would spare the red-haired girl's life. Dragon, however, never intended to let the ice heroine escape. He made it clear that Area 1 was not a place she could come and go as she pleased. She remained silent, observing. He told his companion that he would leave the ice heroine to him since he wanted to test the masked man's abilities. Dragon was warned not to go overboard, as the company was interested in recruiting the masked man. But Dragon's interest in the masked man was different. He just wanted to have some fun with his future little brother. As Dragon observed the fight, the redhead shouted in his ear, cheering on her masked brother. The young heroine with ice powers thought that, with everything in place, she would catch Dragon off guard, so she launched her barrage of ice spears, not expecting that the other hero would use the aura slash of his sword. Even seeing the sword coming toward her, she didn't move. As a result, she took the hit directly to the face. This left the red-haired girl quite shocked because she didn't shatter into pieces. The swordsman hero, realizing that it was just an illusion, ran off but knew she had to be nearby. In the midst of the confusion, the red-haired girl lost sight of her brother, Yuji, and started calling out for him. He was in a corner, waiting for his powers to return, as they were being drained by that sword. Things changed when he noticed that the sword was also made of a monster and realized he could take its ability. With this idea, he managed to absorb the sword's abilities. He transformed the abilities into 250 black cubes of obtained power. He thought he had gained several black cubes, but it was to be expected from an entire S-rank monster sword. The question was which ability he should upgrade since he needed enough power to face Demon Dragon. With precision, he decided to improve his B-rank metallic transformation ability. By upgrading it first, he turned it into an incredible A-rank ability, Control. With his new stance, he caught the attention of the ice heroine. Now the protagonist could sense reinforced concrete structures, cars, and airplanes. At last, he finally had enough power to fight against the experts. While feeling all that energy, the ice-powered girl thought she could catch him off guard. With just one movement, he dissipated her power. He transformed her power into a giant propeller, returning to her the momentum of the power she had launched at him. An A-rank heroine never thought someone so insignificant could be troublesome. Meanwhile, the masked man continued manipulating the giant propeller, and he astonished those watching. Not only that, but he also subdued the intruder with metallic tentacles. He told her not to move because he usually treated women kindly, and when he pointed his hand toward her heart, he managed to absorb her power, now possessing the A-rank ability orb Snow Queen. The protagonist was surprised, as he thought it was an elemental type rather than a summoning ability. The young woman who had her power taken was now just an ordinary girl. The swordsman hero didn't understand why the masked man was dealing with some random girl. Demon Dragon didn't understand why he was with some random girl. The protagonist clarified that she wasn't just any girl, she was the Snow Queen. Demon Dragon was annoyed upon hearing the protagonist say he had an A-rank ability. Seizing the opportunity, the protagonist challenged either of them to a fight. If they refused, they would have to team up and attack him together. Everything was set to be broadcast live, and the news was about the upcoming 2v1 battle. The comment section was exploding during the broadcast. Everyone wanted to see if the 2v1 fight would actually happen. Dragon was sharp and knew that falling for provocations in front of the audience wouldn't be good for his reputation. It was a shame because a fight between them could have been quite exciting. Demon Dragon advised his friend, saying he should understand his opponent before starting the fight. With the same sharpness, he noticed the ring on the masked man's hand. That way, he could be sure if that man truly had enough skill to defeat Snow Queen. Before anything else, he warned the masked man that if he managed to defeat him, then they would definitely launch their attack. But the protagonist wasn't interested in talking and immediately launched the first attack. The swordsman wasn't playing around either and decided to block the power with his sword. But the real surprise was the ability that followed after the ice. This confused the spectators and created an opening for the masked man to attack. Fortunately, the swordsman blocked an attack that could have been troublesome. He barely avoided getting hit, but he noticed that the masked man was trying to control the sword. Seeing that his attempt at control was useless, the protagonist stepped back a few paces. He raised a barrier to buy time and change his strategy. He needed to evolve an ability to A rank to defeat Wanderer Swordsman. With both abilities, Snow Queen and Control in hand, he managed to fuse them. He transformed Control into an A rank ability, making him a natural dominator, although that wasn't exactly his plan for that ability. Impatient spectators questioned what he was doing, and if he had already given up on the fight. The protagonist told them not to be so hasty and to wait a little, and then he launched the mind control attack. The swordsman immediately saw the image of his older sister before him. When he saw his sister's image in front of him, he became destabilized. Hesitant, he attacked the masked man. Sweating, he wondered what kind of mental user he was to possess a dual ability, but for him, it was already too late. Even he hadn't expected the hero to have such a weakness. Visibly discouraged, he refused to attack the image of his older sister, who had already passed away. The spectators at the scene couldn't believe what they were seeing. They wanted the hero Wanderer Swordsman to have been defeated. The commentators questioned why the hero was still dazed and standing in the same position. Everyone knew that hero was always alert and cautious about a possible mental ability. Meanwhile, the nearby redhead was rooting for the masked man because she needed to get the money he owed her. Hearing that, the protagonist could hardly believe he was being scolded at a moment like that. Seeing that the hero had been defeated, Dragon commented that he had done a good job forcing him to reveal his trump card. His friend's advice was not to look into the masked man's eyes, as that ability was difficult to counter. When Demon Dragon finally decided to attack, the masked man was already waiting for him. For the red-haired, horned hero, the fight had many meanings, and he found it interesting to make a bet. The masked man did not oppose it and asked what he would like to wager. Without wasting time, Demon Dragon stated that if he lost, he would have to reveal the secret of the artifact he was using. The protagonist liked that because, fortunately, Demon Dragon wasn't too careless and had noticed the suction star. Determined, Dragon charged in for the first strike, making his presence immediately known. However, the protagonist also already had his defense plan, but the enemy was truly fast and was already setting up a counterattack. He struck the protagonist fiercely in the back. With that blow, he was sent flying. Because of this, the commentators went wild, unable to understand what was happening to the man in the black cape. All that could be seen now was the protagonist being thrown. Dragon didn't care if that man was a dual ability user. He thought he was nothing compared to his own powers. The blow the masked man took was direct, causing some damage. This made him have a coughing fit beneath his mask. Looking at Demon Dragon, he thought that guy was extremely fast and had powerful attack strength. Dragon, seeing that the masked man was still standing, figured his bones must be really tough. The masked man's next attack was control. Dragon, struck by that power, began hallucinating about his younger brother. He refused to believe that the masked man had been arrogant enough to transform into his little brother. His fury was so intense that he managed to achieve the transformation into the Black Flame Earth Dragon. The protagonist found it odd. The spell had backfired. The commentators were ecstatic because they could now witness Demon Dragon's second transformation. He charged at the protagonist to attack. However, the masked man was already prepared for the counterattack. In the form of a whirlwind, he asked if he really thought he could pierce him with sharp metal. The protagonist found it interesting that the enemy was transforming into a drill and was also curious to see if he could withstand the next attack. With that, he pulled out a large chunk of nearby metal and began floating on it. Even so, Dragon declared that the protagonist would not escape him. However, when he was attacked, Dragon reverted to his original form. While being immobilized, he asked if the masked man had already forgotten about the black flames he possessed. He struggled, trying to use his black flames to break free. The commentators believed the metal wouldn't last long against Dragon's black flames. Hearing all this up close, the redhead couldn't hold back and scolded that commentator who didn't know what he was talking about. While Dragon attempted to melt the steel ropes holding him, the protagonist knew that, even if the fire resistance of rank B wasn't very high, it would at least hold up on the first attempt. With that, using his magnetism, he pulled cars, poles, and other metals toward Dragon. Creating a massive metallic cube, he called that attack Titan Fist. Everyone nearby tried to keep their distance to avoid being caught in it. At that moment, Dragon feared for his life. Now that the smoke had cleared, everyone would see Demon Dragon's condition. Amid the comments, someone managed to spot Flamer Butterfly. The red-haired heroine didn't seem to be acting normal. Her companion, an older hero, asked her to leave the area. Looking from above, he decided he would handle the situation. With his power, he held up the massive metal box. When the spectators saw that a hero of rank GXC Zhang had appeared, their hopes were renewed. Because of that hero, the other two were now safe. The swordsman hero used an air barrier. Even so, they barely survived. Beach, the eldest, thought it was good that both of them were still alive. Flame Butterfly asked if they needed her help. The swordsman hero asked them to take care of Demon Dragon. After the chaos had settled, the protagonist was in the apartment with some medicine. Running into those three had been quite tense for him. However, his main goal was to focus on the blue pill. And the two people who knew about this were the hero being Chuan and SAR Spicy. The protagonist knew that he might face more problems in the future and that it was no longer convenient to share the apartment. When his roommate arrived, he nearly died of fright. She wanted to know what kind of medicinal smell was filling the entire room. She looked around a lot, as if suspecting something. It was great that they had returned because he needed to talk to them about something. Out of nowhere, he bluntly stated that he would have to move out and leave them. The news hit like a bomb. He explained that it wasn't appropriate for a man to live with 3 women. One of them asked if he didn't care about Naixui. He said there was nothing going on between them. The girls came to a consensus. Since that was the case, they had no reason to stop him from leaving. Trying to ease the situation, he said he would take them out for a meal that day. But all he heard was a door slamming shut, as one of the girls was deeply disappointed. The protagonist didn't know if he had said something wrong. The protagonist said that if they were going out, it would be best if they all went together. Shou-ai asked why he was treating Naixui that way and called him a jerk. They said they would take a nap and would only eat together after he talked to Naixui. The protagonist told himself that he couldn't say he had no feelings for her, but he didn't want to put her in danger. He knocked on the bedroom door, and soon as she said it was open. Upon entering, he saw that she was lying on the bed, looking upset. Quickly, he apologized, but the young woman was deeply hurt. Crying, she asked if he despised her past. Before he could answer, she bombarded him with questions. Trying to calm Naik-su, he placed his hands on her shoulders. He thought that the love she felt was because of her family and that she had decided to entrust this feeling to someone else. And because of his response, she interpreted it negatively, as if it was her past's fault. He said she was like a porcelain doll. If touched by the one she loves, she cracks easily. He wondered how he could be so cruel. When he tried to take back his words, she said he was right, and that she was rushing things. She thought that after their hug, they would already be in love. She said it wasn't the right time yet, but she didn't want to be forgotten and asked if he could be her future boyfriend. Sighing, he said he would accept. Later that night, in another house, Bing Chuan, lying on a couch, asked for more drinks. Liu Yuan, standing behind a wall, looked at him and thought that if it weren't for the mission, he would never spend so much money on him. Taking advantage of the fact that he was asleep, he approached and searched through his clothes. After searching for a while, he found a strange box. But just at that moment, Bing Chuan woke up and asked what he was doing. Covering up, he said he was looking for a lighter. Without suspecting anything, Bing Chuan asked where the girls were. Liu Yuan quickly said that they were waiting for him and that he should choose one as she would serve him. Seizing the opportunity, he rummaged through Bing's belongings to find something. Finally, he found what he was looking for. He smelled what was inside the box and realized that the scent made him crave it intensely. But a thought snapped him out of the trance. That could be the blue pill. But out of nowhere, he heard a scream. The calmness of his thoughts was shattered by a noise coming from the room where the hero was. In the time it took to grab a square piece from inside the box, he only thought about hiding it and quickly put it in his pocket. Worried about the noise he had heard, he went to check if Lin Qinyang would open the door and explain what was happening. However, when the door opened, the two stood there in silent tension. Curious, the young hare looked into the room and was shocked by what he saw. Breaking into a cold sweat, he looked at the hero and asked if that woman was all ready. Calmly, the hero confirmed it. Trying to keep his composure, the hare said everything was fine and that the hero could go ahead as he would look for the people from the company. The hero, still concerned, left the mess for the young hare to handle. Anxious, he thought about what that man might do if he discovered the theft. Meanwhile, down in the parking lot, the hero was furious for having failed once again, apparently upset for not being able to feel emotions after consuming the blue pill. He was so furious about not being able to control his own powers that made it difficult for him to have fun. However, looking at his box, he noticed something was missing. His anger was so great that he didn't care, thinking that one more or less wouldn't make a difference. Well known, he sped away in his sports car. After spending some time elsewhere, the protagonist was being stopped by his friend, who couldn't stand the idea of him moving away. The protagonist said that sharing an apartment with women was an illusion because it was very uncomfortable. The sharp-witted friend thought that discomfort was where the real benefit lay. This made his friend think he was a bit unconventional at times. Upon arriving at the address, the chubby friend wondered where he had gotten so much money, because the house was stunning. After finishing the move, the protagonist was finally alone and found it a bit lonely. He thought that ever since he faced Demon Dragon, he hadn't had time to use his summoning ability, Show Queen. He considered that even after removing parts to upgrade his control ability, something was still missing. So he raised his hands and commanded the summon to appear. Gradually, he saw red elf-like features looking at him. At first, he was startled because a Lule had emerged. However, it was just a small, cute elf with a sweet appearance. The little one's ice powers made everything around freeze, and he felt extremely cold. The little one, in turn, wanted to get closer to him. He stepped back and asked her not to come any closer, but the tiny elf didn't want him to worry. Hearing her say that the cold around them would lessen just a little, he still disagreed. So the protagonist decided to use the fire element to warm himself up. The little Xiao found the fire very beautiful to look at and moved closer. Her face grew happier and happier as she felt the warmth of the fire. The protagonist thought the ice effect must be passive because if it weren't, even the fire element wouldn't be able to resist. With half-open eyes, the little one thought that her master's body must also be warm. He kept retreating further and further away from her, but when he noticed she had fallen asleep on his knee, he felt pity. He grabbed a blanket, trying to warm her up. However, he only did that because she was small and cute, but it would only be this once. Morning came, and finally, it was time for the fan meeting of the hero SAR Spicy. Amidst a crowd of crazed fans going wild over the hero, the protagonist was there in the middle, pretending to be a lunatic fan, the kind that screams and jumps up and down in the crowd. Then, a woman announced that the hero would be ready in just a few moments. She also asked if everyone was ready to scream as loud as they could. However, everyone was already screaming like maniacs. Confetti rained down from above, falling over the hero and his followers. For that crowd, it was as if he were the glorious hero of all. Playing his part, the protagonist wanted to stand out among all the fans, and when he was pushed, he took advantage of the situation to get noticed. With that, the hero caught the fan in his arms, showing that he was a true hero. The The protagonist wasted no time and pretended to be extremely excited. He quickly went for a firm handshake and introduced himself, all to install one of his orbs on the hero. Looking into the hero's eyes, he said he was his #1 fan. Gradually, the crowd began to disperse. When it was all over, he was satisfied that everything had come to an end. Disgusted by having touched so many filthy hands, he wanted to take a nap right there in the car since later that night he still had to participate in a special program. The secretary agreed with him, saying the best option was to rest in peace if he could actually manage to do that in the car. He replied that even if he couldn't, he would have to because it was necessary. He knew that all the money he earned was like a bottomless pit. He always needed to make more. He wanted to gamble once again, but knew he couldn't keep doing that. He was startled when suddenly someone approached from behind and asked if living that way was exhausting. Breaking into a cold sweat, he turned around to see who it was, and he immediately recognized the masked face of Yuji, the one everyone was talking about. The masked man told him not to be so scared. He just wanted to ask a few questions. Questions about why he was in the same company as Demon Dragon. The protagonist quickly used his control ability on that person. With that, the hero was paralyzed, and the protagonist realized that he was inside the mental world of the hero SAR Spicy. He began rummaging through his memories and looking through various windows with some expectations. Some displayed past events, while others showed moments from the present. He found a blurry-faced figure holding a blue pill that immediately caught his attention. He searched for more conversations between the two. You can find several moments when the two of them stayed in contact. That hero did it for pills. It was an agreement. He provided information, and in exchange, a man gave him some blue pills. He would talk about the heroes from his company and their weaknesses, for that man with the emblematic face to be able to act. The protagonist knew that they had met more than once, maybe 2 or 3 times, perhaps even 4. Recently, the two met again, and the man with the emblematic face wanted to know about the masked man. The hero didn't know anything about this person since he wasn't from the same company. However, the man wanted answers, and only then would he give him more pills. He saw memories unfolding in a parking lot where luxurious cars were gathered. That emblematic man wanted to know about the secret abilities of that hero. For that, he handed over a certain number of blue pills. For that hero, all he had to do was look for information about the masked man. The protagonist understood that behind the blue pill organization, they were not only stealing information and abilities from users, but they also wanted to uncover the darkness within each hero. What was the reason? When the hero came to his senses, begging to be spared, he looked around and realized he was alone, struggling for nothing. Meanwhile, somewhere else, with some flies buzzing around annoyingly, the young hare was searching for his godfather. The masked man, observing, asked why he was grumbling so much. The young partner asked why his godfather had taken so long to arrive. Satisfied with his findings, he said he had used all means and resources and handed him the so-called pill. He looked at it and wondered if the Messiah would be the same. The young man wanted to know if it was because of that pill that the hero had been attacking people. The trash heroes would do anything and use any method to gain fame. Seizing the opportunity, he asked his godson what he thought a true hero would do. He knew this was nothing more than a test to see if he would pass. So taking a deep breath, he said that a hero should live to save and protect. The other looked at that textbook answer and thought it would be foolish to trust someone like that. However, he threw something into a vial, which was a medication for ability enhancement. The hero questioned why it was only level D. His godfather reminded him again that the steps had to be followed over time and through missions. He thought the mixture looked a lot like tomato sauce. The protagonist, laughing internally, said he must be mistaken. Using his werewolf control at D rank, he wasn't transforming this time, but the protagonist thought he had never truly activated that ability sphere before. Remembering this, he said he simply hadn't absorbed it properly and mentioned that he needed a bit of a warm-up. The young man, looking back, asked if his godfather intended to use him as a punching bag. However, that was exactly the case, but he also said he would have to endure it to be properly trained. Time passed, night fell, and the two were still at it. The young hare, after transforming, said he had definitely evolved. However, his godfather told him he should conserve the ability, as keeping his body in that state would be exhausting. Listening to his godfather, the young man shifted back to his human form and received some additional information. The young man was grateful, knowing his godfather was concerned, and he also received his second mission. Deep in thought, he asked what the organization's reason was for gathering more manpower. Upon hearing that it was for raw material, he realized the organization was trying to collect abilities. The masked young man commented that he was right. After all, where else would they get the ability infused into those medication vials? Even so, the young one pouted, frustrated that he had worked so hard just to obtain a C rank ability. Meanwhile, the masked man was gliding on his iron board over the sea. He was able to remove his mask for a while. He also wanted to summon Snow Queen, and with that, the sky became clear. The little one appeared, asking if her master had missed her, running towards him. Then he asked her to control herself because they were about to do a type of training. She said she would never want to hurt her master, but he replied that she didn't need to worry. Hearing that, the little one got into position to start training. The protagonist asked her to always do her best. As she focused, a crack in space-time appeared. The protagonist didn't know whether to pay attention to the giant paw emerging from that dimensional rift. Monster invasions rarely happened, and fortunately, these were only D rank. Then, a unicorn appeared, also with a water-type level. Concerned for the little one, the protagonist asked her to be careful. In that dangerous situation, the little one simply jumped up, trying to evade the frog. With everything at stake, the protagonist unleashed his power upon the monster. But he stopped midway as he was interrupted by an intense, brilliant light. The little one saw herself transforming into a stunning woman. Now she truly was show queen. She introduced herself and then immediately asked if the frog was courting death. The beautiful ice lady displayed her brilliance against that tiny frog. In terms of power ranking, the frog was nothing. Seeing how the frog was looking at her type of dress, however, the protagonist asked her to step away from the battle. He couldn't help but notice certain parts of her that had changed, making him slightly flushed. He felt that she had a warrior spirit and a fierce personality. Unleashing her power against the frog, he became passionately frozen. However, he wasn't just frozen. The love he felt was so intense that it warmed him from within, and plasma took over. Seeing the situation, the protagonist had to step in. Even as he launched attacks against the frog, it managed to dodge. Its target was clear in its mind, the young woman with the ample curves. Seeing that the frog had its sights set on his friend, he warned her to stay alert. However, her ice spikes immobilized the large frog for a moment, making the protagonist appreciate that move and deliver a checkmate. Everything went as planned, even with that other rank D ability, but the protagonist seemed to be forgetting something. For a moment, he lost track of the horse that had come out of the rift alongside the frog. Show Queen warned that it was heading straight for the city. However, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing since he would begin the hunt precisely with that creature. But the ice lady started feeling dizzy as her control was fading. The protagonist questioned what was happening and called her Xiao Xtui. Annoyed, she told him that wasn't her name, it was the little one's. She also said that her time was short and that she needed to do something she had longed to do. She tried to stretch her lips toward his, but at that moment, the transformation ended and she reverted to being a tiny elf. However, her memories weren't shared with the other being. Concerned for her, the protagonist asked if she was okay, given the confusion the little one was experiencing. He knelt for a moment looking at her to see if she was alright. She, in turn, asked her master why she felt so tired. However, he explained that it was due to the transformation. He wanted to know if she remembered anything. The little one said she couldn't share memories with the other who shared the same summoning. The ice had the same summon, but its battle state was entirely different. However, the little Xiao Xui also wanted a warm and cozy hug from her master. He came to the conclusion that both of them just wanted to take advantage of him, but he told her to rest and return to her summoned form. Feeling very sleepy, she bid farewell to her master, saying she needed to be absent for a while. He only watched as she transformed back into her summoned state. Without time to think, he noticed that the monster was heading straight for the city. Elsewhere, near the beach, an hare was walking, thinking he was a wolf running through the grass. He and his red sports car fit the scenery perfectly. However, when he looked out at the sea, he noticed something strange, an anomaly. Looking more closely, he realized it was a beast, a monster in the shape of a unicorn. He turned his car around upon noticing civilians on the beach. Jumping out, he waved frantically to get the people's attention and warn them of the imminent danger. Unfortunately, he managed to attract attention in the worst way. A young woman noticed him waving. The young man with her thought he was just trying to show off with his fancy car. Then they noticed that he was yelling something, warning about a monster. And when everyone turned around, they saw a terrifying scene. The unicorn-shaped monster was incredibly fast. The wealthy young man wasn't sure whether he should help or just save himself. Without thinking too much, he decided to help, though he didn't know when he had become so soft-hearted. As a beautiful young woman struggled in the water, her chubby friend managed to save her. He told her to hold on to a tree trunk, but when it was his turn, he couldn't. He was caught by that giant unicorn. The young woman could do nothing but scream for her friend, who had been snatched by the beast. And at that moment, the hero appeared, saying he would carry her on his back. Still crying, she said that her chubby friend had been dragged into the sea and begged the hero to save him. However, the hero assured her that he would take her to safety first, and then return for her friend. Staying there was too dangerous, as the monsters could come back. As he carried her, he couldn't help but think about how someone so thin could feel so heavy. From the helicopter, they observed the wealthy young man running along the beach. The reporter couldn't believe how many calls they had received from the crowd, all saying that monsters had appeared. They planned to check on the victims and saw that the two young people on the beach had managed to escape. They also noticed that the one who saved the girl was the wealthy young man, an internet celebrity, the young Master Liu. Elsewhere, his hand was trying to improve his condition. At the training site, the television was on, reporting what was happening. Demon Dragon was talking with a friend when his attention was drawn to the television. His friend told him to look quickly at the broadcast. The monster had appeared on the coast, and his brother was there. Shocked, he stood up to get closer to the TV and see what was going on. He saw the young man running with the girl in his arms while being watched by the beast. Meanwhile, at the scene, the reporter was getting details about what was happening. And at Demon Dragon's house, he couldn't believe that his brother, Liu Yuan, instead of running away, was sating victims. Watching the broadcast, he saw that the monster was too close to both of them. He saw when his younger brother looked back, already spotting the monster. Demon Dragon's friend even closed his eyes, thinking it was over for the younger brother. Meanwhile, Demon Dragon trembled and called out his little brother's name, but the swordsman hero told Demon Dragon to pay attention because his brother was using a certain ability. All of this was new to him. He had never heard that his brother had a transformation ability. However, his brother had transformed into a large white wolf while still holding the young girl in his arms. When she opened her eyes and saw the enormous hero, she blushed with happiness. Meanwhile, the hero celebrity showed off his muscles, but after leaving the young girl on the beach, he shouted that he would save his friend and destroy the monster. Someone else who was there and could save the friend first was the masked man. For now, he thought he would just observe how his godson fought. The protagonist seemed quite excited to see Liu's fight. The young hero shouted at the monster to watch its back. As for the beast, it only neighed. However, the white wolf noticed something when he saw the unicorn's hooves. Smiling, he waited for the creature to attack because he wanted to counter. He grabbed the animal's legs and started spinning, rotating in 360-degree movements. After building up momentum, he hurled the unicorn far away. The white wolf watched as the monster fell into the water. He didn't know when the monsters had invaded, but finally he would no longer be just an ordinary human. Raising his arms high, he declared that he had surpassed his big brother and even the old man. Looking at everything from above, he felt that his job was well done. The short-haired young girl he had saved was sad about her friend. She even cried when she saw that her friend had been dragged into the depths of the sea by the monster. Her friends, upon hearing this, couldn't believe that their chubby friend had suffered any harm. But she pointed to the middle of the sea and said that the hero had helped her and promised to rescue the big guy. However, in the middle of the water, the wolf didn't know what was happening. Suddenly, a whirlpool started forming beneath his feet. He was caught off guard by the unicorn, which without mercy, drove its horn into the white wolf's back. After that, he was thrown far away by the monster. Seeing what was happening, the crowd became agitated by all the commotion. The reporter, who was observing everything from above, noted that the wolf had a back injury and knew that Liu was at a disadvantage. At that moment, the scene cut to Demon Dragon's house, where he was already preparing to rescue his little brother. Equipped with his flight gear, he quickly set off in that direction. Meanwhile, the wolf felt pain from the wound. The unicorn, with eyes full of rage, prepared to attack again. The white wolf looked up and noticed that the unicorn was about to strike once more, this time forming a massive whirlpool heading straight for him. The reporter was startled because the monster was furious, which would be terrible for Liu. Being swallowed by the whirlpool, he could no longer breathe. However, looking up, he saw that his godfather was above. The water vortex took the shape of a typhoon, and Liu cried out for his godfather's help. He was submerged in the water, arms spread, begging for his godfather to save him. The viewers feared for Master Liu's life. The young girl he had saved was hoping he would be safe. That was when they saw in the sky the masked man flying on a piece of metal. Everyone felt relieved as reinforcements had finally arrived. That was Lord Yuji. Reporter Lu Gang felt relieved to see that the mysterious Yujai had arrived to help. The godson, soaring through the air, thought that he was responding that way. Now it was just a matter of waiting to see if the blue pill would take the bait or not. His element was metal, and the onlookers nearby were startled to see the metal bending. The protagonist created several metal arrows, launching them at the unicorn. He wanted to eliminate the monster quickly and efficiently. Thus, he fired his arrows toward the little horse. He even had time to save his godson, placing him onto the metallic platform. Reporter Lu Gang was evidently rooting for the mysterious masked man. The white wolf, still on the metallic surface, returned to his original form while unconscious. The masked man extracted the pony horse's abilities. Its ability was ranked as a specialty in surfing. The protagonist looked at his godson lying there and imagined that he had helped attract the attention of the blue pill. For that reason, he decided to let him take all the credit. He slowly descended, acting as if he had no idea what was happening, and took the already rescued victims with him. With that, the hero Riquinho woke up, still feeling pain. However, he was surprised by a warm embrace from the young woman he had saved. Overcome with emotion, he even blushed. People wanted to know why he had changed so much, as they had believed him to be nothing but a disgrace to his wealthy family. Meanwhile, Liu looked up at the sky, mentally thanking his godfather for letting him take the credit. Everyone believed that Yuji was a true hero, almost like a god. But amidst the crowd, there was someone who didn't use abilities. When Liu looked back, he saw who it was and became frightened. It was someone sent by the association to punish those who use abilities without authorization. That man was not welcome in the middle of the crowd. People whispered that he was from the Hero Association and was overly nosy. Liu, realizing he was in trouble, quickly said that he had only saved a few people. However, the man didn't care about his reasons for using abilities in a public area. As the man spoke, he wanted to know who would have the courage to take his brother in for interrogation. He was visibly ready for a fight if necessary. His presence left Liu unsettled. Demon Dragon knew that the wolf's regeneration ability was quite strong. The man from the Hero Association left, annoyed and grumbling. However, Demon Dragon, looking at his brother, wondered how, all of a sudden, he had awakened his abilities. Afterward, he headed to the protagonist's house and took a shower. He was observing the ability related to the water element. With that, he now had elements such as flame, plasma, metal control, and the specialty of surfing. He thought that he would like to find a healing ability capable of restoring that state. However, the only thing he could attempt at the moment was to infiltrate the body of the hero SAR Spicy. With that, he closed his eyes and began using his control ability. At that moment, the hero SAR Spicy, who was unoccupied, was walking through the park. Then he was taken over by the protagonist, who seized control of his body. Now he had complete control over his mind. He paused for a moment, looked at his hands and arms, and noticed that the possession of the hero's body had been successfully executed. He decided to test mental control. He realized that it seemed like the aura of the ability was still in the original body and hadn't moved along with his soul. However, the protagonist also saw something else. People were having a heated discussion nearby. From behind a tree, he observed as a man was making indecent proposals to a young woman. The man even blushed at the absurd proposals he was making to her. He told her that she should serve him or his boss, who was a rank a hero, the saint of the organization. That was when the protagonist heard that the man had a healing type ability and became interested in his boss. Meanwhile, that arrogant man was tearing parts of the young woman's blouse as she insisted that she wanted nothing to do with him and pleaded to be let go. However, he was suddenly thrown into a bush. From there, he angrily asked who had dared to kick him. Stepping forward, a giant man declared that it was him and that, in the name of justice, he would deliver the appropriate punishment to the aggressor. Emerging from the bushes, the ill-mannered man realized that the large figure standing before him was SAR Spicy. With a serious expression, he asked if the man would like something similar to happen to his own sister or even his daughter. The shameless man tried to play innocent, claiming that the young woman was merely an intern at the company. The woman was upset upon hearing him say that it was her duty to serve him and others. The protagonist told her to carefully consider her situation, as once something like that began, there was no end to it. Looking up at the towering man, the woman said she understood and that she would keep her distance from people like that. She looked at that mischievous man, made a face, and called him trash. After that, she left, leaving the man alone with the hero who was ready to teach him a lesson. However, that green-haired man looked at the hero and thought it was nothing serious as long as he got what he wanted before the transformation. With that in mind, he said that bastard couldn't dare let his prey slip from his hands. With his arms crossed, the hero wanted to know what kind of consequences awaited him. That man was not only shameless but also clueless, as he even tried to lunge at the hero. However, the protagonist knew exactly what to do in that situation. Taking an energy pill, he transformed into the hero SAR Spicy. The man did not expect that, but even more surprising than that was the punch he received, making him a little more aware. The punch was so powerful that he rolled once again toward the bushes and took the opportunity to hide, knowing that the hero's transformation only lasted a few minutes. The protagonist knew he had 15 minutes to catch the bastard. However, his mental power was far too great for it to last just a few minutes. Since the duration of the ability was determined by spiritual and mental strength, he knew that as long as he could use his mental energy to sustain the ability, he could exert his full power. Because of that, he didn't mind waiting for the scoundrel to come out of hiding. Even so, he was able to sense where he was. As he walked toward the man's hiding spot, he commented that only the weak enjoyed hiding. Terrified, the man couldn't believe he had been found, thinking he was well hidden. To make him even more frightened, the protagonist said he had been hiding his true power from the media and everyone else. Shocked, the man shouted that he surrendered and begged to be let go. He even offered benefits, promising he wouldn't cause any trouble or seek revenge. However, with an amused expression, the protagonist remarked that the man had just reminded him of something. At that moment, the man started sweating and nervously asked what he was planning to do. Placing his hands near his lower back, he asked if the man had any unusual preferences. While pleading, the man was still being held by the collar, suspended in the air. The protagonist thought he could teach a lesson to trash like that, and at the same time, prevent future resentment, and a thirst for revenge. Dragging the man by the leg, he took him behind the bushes. There, the man screamed in desperation, begging not to have his clothes removed. After some time, the protagonist emerged, already back in his normal form, but still in the hero's body. He looked at his phone with satisfaction because now he had something to prevent that malicious man from causing more trouble. He typed a message on his phone, ensuring that the photos wouldn't be deleted to keep the forest ranger from stirring up any problems. The protagonist concluded that he had gathered enough information and could now release his control. As soon as he did, the hero simply regained consciousness, still standing, looking confused at his phone. Realizing he was still in the park, he looked at the screen again and found some strange images. The content made him feel a bit embarrassed. Meanwhile, at the city's Hero Association branch, the organization's leader, a man with a stern appearance, was in a meeting with several heroes. Even the vice leader was present. They were discussing defense plans against the large-scale threat of the cavity. The vice leader explained that after the execution of the plan, everyone would take an offensive stance and force the monsters to retreat. Some heroes seemed satisfied with supporting the association in this strategy. However, an old A-rank hero did not believe it would be so easy to maintain control of the cavity. This experienced hero was, in fact, Liu's father. He knew that if someone became a monster hunter, they could earn a lot of money. Everyone there understood that the most crucial element was information, knowing that the monster world had the capability to enhance items. Given these facts, he cast a sharp glance at a young hero with blue hair, as he knew the key to success was having a user with extremely powerful abilities. However, that young blue-haired hero seemed more interested in special items that had enhancement abilities. After the meeting, the scene shifted to the protagonist's home. He was satisfied because he had successfully created a clone. He was still contemplating how to combine his plasma and metal control abilities. He tested different ways to break them down and refine the plasma to reach A rank. After several attempts, he obtained a B rank ability called Shadows, which allowed him to create clones. With this, he transferred some abilities to the clone he had created. Then he told him that Yuji was a dominator and that he too should have a cold heart. That way, he now had another member in his organization, Snake. His mission was sacred, as he had the ability to collect skills, and for that reason, the protagonist trusted him. The plane was flying over the second area of Sheiju City, and when it landed, the protagonist was displeased with the heat of the place. After that, he took a taxi. The taxi driver immediately recognized that he was from Area 1. Meanwhile, inside the taxi, the protagonist received a message from his godson, bringing news about the holy organization. The taxi driver kept chattering non-stop, talking about places where one could find games and women. Glancing in the rearview mirror for a moment, the taxi driver said that the protagonist was a handsome guy and that he could recommend some good places for him to have fun. That was when he started talking about some clubs that were expensive but had beautiful women. The protagonist was displeased to think that even that kind of work had gained such great fame in the city. After driving around for a while, they finally arrived at the hotel where he would be staying. The protagonist was surprised when he was notified that the fare would cost 500 Azure. Processing the information, he realized the price had been multiplied by 5. He confronted the taxi driver, saying that he must be looking at the wrong price. The taxi driver tried to justify it, saying there were additional fees included and pointing at something that was supposed to make the protagonist change his mind. But that didn't faze the protagonist, who said he wouldn't hesitate to teach him a lesson. Using his mental control, the taxi driver suddenly became so kind that he carried the protagonist's luggage with the utmost care. Not only that, but he even waited patiently while the protagonist spoke with the receptionists at the front desk. Everyone watched curiously as the taxi driver carried the man's bag so attentively. A woman nearby was impressed by the protagonist's charm and wondered when he would invite her to dinner. Yang, as soon as he reached the elevator, informed that he needed to take care of something. The taxi driver was to take his luggage to his room, along with the others from Area 1. He took the elevator to the 37th floor. According to his godson's information, that was where he would find Fake Boxer. Checking his phone, he confirmed that everything was correct. Without hesitation, he transformed into a shadow and managed to slip through the spaces unnoticed. As he approached the room where the ill-mannered hero was, he began hearing laughter. The hero was having a great time with 2 female companions. However, the atmosphere changed abruptly when the women were startled to see the shadow of a tentacle pulling the man away. Frightened, he turned around to see who was suddenly attacking him. However, the protagonist was highly skilled at handling shadow attacks. Completely wild, the man raised his arms to try to block the strike. In no time, the shadows had already restrained the 2 women, who now seemed to be in trouble. He claimed that it didn't matter who his enemy was because he absorbed people's fear. That's why he had already absorbed the fear of his companions to deal with the masked intruder. However, the protagonist, wearing Snake's mask, was well prepared. The villain, who wore the skin of a hero, quickly realized that this power allowed the infiltrator to break in unnoticed. Meanwhile, the protagonist simply thought that acting like a cold and calculating guy was more difficult than it seemed, but he needed to keep his composure. The villain reflected that if it weren't for the two girls giving him power, he might not have been able to escape. Up to that point, he still had illusions that he could get away from the protagonist. Dodging some attacks, he asked the masked man who he was and what his intentions were. Charging forward, he warned that he was from the Holy Organization and that the masked man should be careful. The protagonist didn't even attempt to dodge the punch. The villain couldn't believe that his strike had been completely ignored, and when he was sure he would land a hit, he realized it was only a shadow clone. However, when he punched the shadow, it solidified and grabbed his arm, making it difficult to defend against the next attack. Panicked, he told the protagonist that the priest would never let him go unpunished. After the protagonist ripped off his mask, the man wept pitifully, begging to be spared. That only made the protagonist realize how weak this person truly was. Placing his hands on the man's head, he managed to steal his ability. The ability was called Mask of Fear, which allowed him to collect people's fear and increase his own strength. Now terrified and powerless, the man desperately asked what the protagonist had done to him. When he started talking too much, the protagonist decided to use mental control to search through his memories. Within them, he gained access to old recollections. In one of them, he saw the priest in a near-death situation. He was saved and rescued by the organization. With all his wounds healed, he offered his loyalty to the saint, and after gathering some information from the man's mind, he took his form and left for another place. As he searched through the villain's memories, he knew he had to investigate the red cargo. In that man's memories, there was information about the identities of the other members of the Saints group. A talented woman claimed to have heard about the girl with the sealed sword. He saw that a servant mentioned she was a minor problem, but intended to deal with her. When he said those words, he was reprimanded by his superior, who warned him that the heroine was an A rank. The group's mage also thought they shouldn't give her too much importance just because she was an A rank. Meanwhile, the saint believed she was nothing more than an ignorant brat, and that they should bring her to him because he liked women like that. The subordinates promptly accepted and informed the leader that they would follow orders. The big man said he would bid farewell to the superior, asking for permission to return. He was told that in the first area, there was a port and that he should check the red cargo. Everything would take place the next day, and he was supposed to assist in inspecting the goods. He was also informed that any damage to the cargo would be considered normal, since it was just part of the process. However, this was only a fragment of the memories the protagonist had gathered. Now aware of the red cargo, he activated his plasma to bypass the fingerprint lock and enter the site. Once inside the warehouse, he noticed that the cargo was just an illusion to conceal the real goods. As he descended the stairs, he caught a strong smell. He also noticed that a guard was on watch. As soon as the guard saw him, he called him Lord Fake. Acting naturally, the protagonist spoke with him, and the guard mentioned that a large shipment had recently arrived and that those children were very noisy. That information made the protagonist even more intrigued. After that, he asked the man to take him to the location. Upon arrival, he saw several children locked in cages. Some were crying, while others just stared in silence. The protagonist thought that this so-called saint was a bastard for running such a trade. From what it seemed, all those children had been captured from different places. That made him recall the face of the superior of the man whose identity he had assumed. He felt a surge of rage upon realizing that wretch lived so carelessly. Further ahead, he saw a blonde man who was chained up. The man was irritated because that young boy had dared to bite his ear. As he was about to unleash his fury on the boy, the protagonist stopped him. He asked if that brat was causing any trouble. The man replied that yes, the boy had dared to bite his ear. The young boy simply stared at the protagonist. Looking into his eyes, he noticed they held a gaze hardened by suffering. Still pretending to be someone else, he asked the blonde man what he had done to make the boy bite his ear. As they spoke, another person arrived and mentioned that the boy had certain intentions. The newcomer was a thin man with blue hair, a member of the Saints organization. In disbelief, the protagonist looked to the side and saw a young girl collapse on the ground. The man smirked and said it was a shame she couldn't withstand the fear. The protagonist could barely contain his rage. Then, the blue-haired man asked his companion if he wasn't enjoying his weekend. With no other choice and needing to keep up appearances, the protagonist replied that the girls he had sent were great. He also said he was there because he had other matters to attend to since he was worth a lot of money. The blue-haired man grabbed the boy's face and said he didn't mind letting him go. Meanwhile, The boy spoke in a dialect that the man didn't understand. However, the protagonist understood it because he was from the same region. Surprised, the blue-haired man asked exactly what he had said. Focusing his power in his hands, the protagonist simply stated that he would make sure the boy's wish was fulfilled. The blue-haired bastard didn't understand what his filthy colleague was trying to say. He widened his eyes in shock as he realized he was about to be attacked. Serious, the protagonist, still in the guise of that massive man, said he understood the boy because they were the same and came from the same place. With that, the enemy realized that he was not the real fake mask. No longer caring about staying hidden, the protagonist decided to end that man. The other guards, upon witnessing the scene, didn't understand what Lord Fake was doing. However, the protagonist warned that none of them would lead that place. Releasing his shadow power, the first to be attacked was the blonde man. He was also the first to be trapped by the shadow and plasma tentacles. As he screamed, he received an intense electric shock. This caused fear and panic in the other guard, who was waiting for his turn. When he could no longer bear the fear, he tried to run to escape his fate. However, he was eliminated, and his ability was taken. The sharp-eyed young man did not understand what was happening, even more so when he saw that huge man in front of him holding ability orbs. He hurried to say that his name was Yi Fan and asked with whom he was speaking. The young people insisted on knowing who that man was. The protagonist, looking at them, said he was just someone who came to save them. The boy found it strange since he had seen him hurt people before. However, he was told that he would understand everything happening within seconds. Using his power, he broke the chains that held the young man. He asked the young man to wait a little while because he needed to move forward and deal with the bad people. As soon as he was freed, the young man ran straight to where the unconscious girl was. That scene reminded the protagonist of his sister, Fay Fay. Quickly, others arrived, trying to stop the man they thought was Fake Mask. But he was ready to fight anyone. Immediately, he unleashed his power on the first one who dared to stand in his way. After a while, he had already dealt with those rats, but they seemed like an infestation because as soon as he finished with one group, another appeared. This time, it was a red-haired man known as Record Playback. He arrived, asking what they should do with that person. He was not alone, as another man stood beside him, calling himself Spearman. He was called that because his power was related to music. He unleashed a sound wave so powerful that it affected even the children. His music agitated people's pain nerves, and the protagonist knew he had to stop him quickly. So he concluded that he should be the first to be eliminated. The man, thinking he had the advantage, launched an attack. However, he soon realized it was just a shadow since the real one was above him. Before he could react, the protagonist jumped and stomped hard on his back. That red-haired man served as a doormat for him. Meanwhile, the other one, who had powers, had an indigenous appearance and fired flaming arrows. He tried to attack by surprise while the protagonist was dealing with the red-haired man. Even though the arrow passed through that body, it caused no damage. The man did not understand why the protagonist had eliminated Playback. Since all three were part of the same organization, the protagonist had a hard time dealing with the attacks but recovered. He could not falter because he had people to save. Determined, he turned around and said he would eliminate them all. With both the protagonist and the enemy holding arrows, the situation between them was tense. The opponent decided to attack and shot the arrows toward the protagonist. Crossing his arms, he protected himself and, in a fit of rage, returned the arrows to the sender. The weakling could not withstand his own power. The protagonist complained because receiving those arrows was a bit painful. However, one of the children became worried and asked if he was hurt. To protect them, it was nothing. Opening all the cells, he urged everyone to hurry and leave without pushing each other. Coming from behind was the teenager with a fleeting gaze, carrying his sister on his back. He was sad because he did not want to feel the pain of not having strength. He wanted to become as strong as that man. The protagonist was initially surprised, but said that if he promised loyalty, he could teach him to be strong. The boy did not hesitate and said he would be the most loyal subordinate he could have. The protagonist took an ability orb and threw it to the teenager. The young man asked the master what that was. It was explained that it was an ability orb that could transform his arms into metal. The young man was pleased to know that he could protect himself and those he loved. Meanwhile, the protagonist needed to deal with those eliminated on the ground. Without delay, he began to absorb the abilities of all of them. In no time, his hand was full of ability orbs, and he had not even needed to exert much effort. With this, he realized that the abilities taken from humans and monsters had notable differences. He was in a hurry because he needed to exchange one of the abilities to become an A rank. After a while, he left that place as if nothing had happened, but suddenly he felt something sharp near his neck. It was the young heroine's sealed sword. As soon as he turned around, he realized that she was the one they had been talking about before. The children quickly ran and recognized their sister, Blanche. The little ones immediately told the woman that the man had saved their lives. After a brief explanation, she understood. She initially felt a bit embarrassed for treating him poorly. She told him that she had learned about the children being held captive. Approaching Yi Fan and seeing him carrying her sister on his back, she apologized for not arriving sooner. Things changed quickly. and everyone started feeling a tremor. The protagonist, turning around, asked what was happening. Suddenly, something appeared, wrapping around the children's legs and pulling them backward. It was a power involving a thorn-covered rosebush. With its branches, it could ensnare people as if they were ropes. However, the protagonist told everyone not to panic because he would save them. From within a red rose, the priest emerged, accompanied by his 3 loyal followers, a woman in red who wielded the power of plants, a stern-looking man dressed in military attire, and an old mage. The priest, standing at the center of that giant rose, declared that everyone there was nothing more than mere insects. Using his magical power, he restored the woman's energy, allowing her to recover some strength, even though she was still exhausted. The priest then noticed the presence of the heroine, sealed sword, among them and warned her that the saint was untouchable for someone like her. He stated that if she surrendered, he would spare her life. Sealed Sword thought that if she were facing only 3 B rank ability users, she could still handle them. She warned that the Hero Association was on its way and could arrive at any moment. However, upon hearing this, the priest remained unfazed and ordered his 3 subordinates to take care of the situation before the association arrived. The heroine, Sealed Sword, unleashed her power. The protagonist was astonished to see that she could generate explosive strength, but then again, that was expected from an A-rank heroine. To try to stop her, the mage appeared in front of her and invoked a magic circle of sand. Immediately, a wall rose before her. Without hesitation, the heroine slashed through the wall with her sword and pressed forward. The next to experience her power was the military man. He attempted to cast a skill called Water Tempest upon her. However, the heroine effortlessly cut through the attack with her sword. At one point, realizing that the hostages were in danger, the woman in red decided to use them as shield. She placed some of the captives in front of her to absorb the impact of an explosion. The heroine, Sealed Sword, found herself in a crisis upon noticing the villain had resorted to such tactics. However, the red-clad villainess did not care, as kindness was not part of her nature. Meanwhile, the military man transformed into water, waiting for the perfect moment to strike her off guard. The attack was almost complete when suddenly, someone stepped in the way. One of the protagonist's masks was shattered. Annoyed, he thought that this had almost been his second snake mask lost. The unexpected attack deeply enraged the masked man. Without hesitation, he retaliated with a devastating blow, causing significant damage to the enemy who had dared to break his mask. However, before the battle could continue, he raised his arm, asking Sealed Sword to wait. The priest, remaining calm, lifted his staff and activated his holy healing power, completely regenerating the grim-looking man. The now healed enemy let out an arrogant laugh as if he were immortal. But it was nothing more than a powerful buff granted by the priest, significantly strengthening the 3 enemies. Watching the scene, the masked man realized how problematic support abilities could be. The mage, now energized, began to show his true strength. Sealed Sword had to exert even more effort to deal with the sudden boost in the enemy's power. The masked man noticed that a large-scale attack could harm the hostages, something that had to be avoided at all costs. He asked Sealed Sword to take on 2 of the enemies while he handled the rest. She hesitated, doubting his words. He, in turn, simply asked her to trust him, even if only for a moment. For some reason, that mysterious man inspired credibility. Determined, she announced that she would clear the way for him. Unleashing her agility seal, she charged at the grim-looking man. Realizing that even with the buff, he couldn't face her, he called out to the woman in red. However, Rose did not appreciate the way she was being treated. With no choice, she activated her Rose enchantment. Sealed Sword felt something strange in her body. Rose smiled, revealing that the heroine was now under the body of lust, a skill that weakened her self-control. Meanwhile, the grim-looking man created water clones to surround her. However, what no one expected was that the heroine had already unleashed her mental spiritual seal. This made her body immune to any influence of lust. They did not expect that, amidst so many crises, she would have learned to defend herself. Without hesitation, she delivered a fatal blow to Rose, who had dared to manipulate the wrong person. The woman, overwhelmed by despair, could not comprehend how someone sanctified had managed to resist her power. The mage, his face covered in bulging veins, refused to accept defeat. Immediately, he conjured a massive dragon-shaped summoning. Meanwhile, the hostages were still chained by Rose's bindings, screaming for help. Sealed Sword would have to face that enormous creature. But before she could react, the masked man was already ahead, handling the threat. He knew exactly what to do. And then, a colossal explosion consumed the battlefield. Amid the dust and smoke of the explosion, a helicopter hovered in the air. The mage, protected by the priest, thanked him for saving him. However, the priest had no patience for incompetence. The mage tried to justify himself, saying that even if they had lost some resources, they could still recover. But the priest, consumed by his own ego, believed that only the strongest should survive. From within the smoke, the masked man emerged, carrying Sealed Sword in his arms. For a moment, he pondered whether he should retreat. Perhaps the best option was simply to flee. The priest, aware of this, remarked that he would let them live for now. However, the ill-tempered man was still lying on the ground, and the masked man needed that ability. Without delay, he extended his hand and absorbed his power. Now he possessed a rank B ability, capable of strengthening the water inside the human body. The next target was Rose. As he absorbed her ability, he reflected on how ruthless Sealed Sword had been. After completing the absorption, he gained a new rank B ability, Summon Vines, allowing thorny branches to grow from the user's body. But he was not satisfied with that. He needed to fuse abilities and raise his level. Using an ability orb he had obtained earlier, he dismantled the new abilities and refined them. The result was a new and brilliant rank A technique, Super Brain. Now his 5 senses were heightened to the extreme: vision, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. Sealed Sword began to awaken. As she regained consciousness, she found herself before a devastated scene. Standing up, still dazed, she asked the masked man who he was and what level of ability he possessed to cause such a massive explosion. He introduced himself as Snake from the organization Judge. She furrowed her brows. She had never heard of a hero organization by that name. Suddenly, she remembered the hostages. Her heart raced, desperate to know about them. The masked man pointed behind her. The children were running to embrace Blanche, who welcomed them with emotion. They told her that, thanks to the Master's black shadow, they had been saved. While everyone was distracted, he had secretly controlled the shadows and cut the hostages' bindings. Blanche sighed, deeply relieved. She turned to Snake and shouted, genuinely grateful. However, he was no longer there. The sound of the helicopter flying overhead signaled that the Hero Association was arriving, but Snake had already vanished into the shadows. The helicopter landed, and some members of the Hero Association disembarked. Among them was a young blonde reporter, Lin Naixui, who was about to conduct her first live interview. The broadcast began, and Sealed Sword's image soon appeared on the big screens, stirring admiration among viewers. The reporter started the conversation by asking about the notification received by the association. Soon, the heroine explained that an illegal operation involving the trade of abilities had been taking place at that location. It was then that the interviewer mentioned having heard rumors about such activities, but never having any confirmation. The heroine reported that she had been investigating the situation for a long time and that it had taken great effort to locate the base of operations. The audience showed interest in both the heroine's courage and the seriousness of the revelation. Throughout the interview, the young woman emphasized that if she had been alone against the priest and his allies, she would not have been able to overcome the conflict. The reporter expressed curiosity about the identity of the person who had provided assistance, and the heroine mentioned that this individual had demonstrated abilities superior to hers. For that reason, he had used a technique capable of nullifying the strengthening effects of their opponents. When asked for more details, she pointed in the direction the masked man had gone. She described the appearance of his mask, marked by the symbol of a serpent. His name was Snake, from the organization Judge. Quickly, this information spread across social media. Messages began appearing, urging the reporter to seek out the mysterious man for an exclusive interview. Amid the buzz, Lin Naixu decided to follow the path indicated by the heroine. Meanwhile, in the underground parking lot, the priest and the mage walked calmly. The mage assured him that they still had enough ability to handle any situation. Without hesitation, the priest instructed him to find a means of transportation so they could leave without difficulty. At a more distant point, the masked man watched them attentively, waiting for the perfect moment to prevent any attempt at escape. However, an unexpected sound interrupted his concentration. The phone rang, drawing the enemy's attention. The masked man reacted with dissatisfaction at the untimely moment. The enemy's approach became inevitable. Looking at the phone screen, it displayed the name of the caller. The call was from his girlfriend. Ignoring the call was not an option. The phone's persistence demanded an immediate decision. With no alternatives, he undid his transformation, assuming the appearance of an ordinary civilian. Upon noticing the unexpected presence, the priest and the mage showed no suspicion, considering him to be just someone uninvolved with the situation. He answered the call, and a cheerful voice came from the other side of the line. She issued a challenge. If he could guess where she was, a special gift would be given as a reward. The answer came without hesitation. Maybe she was at home. A soft laugh echoed before the correction. Her current location was Shenzhou. The information caused an unexpected moment of tension. Her intention was simply to share some news. Meanwhile, the two enemies continued their watchful observation. Curiosity got the better of him, and he asked what the news was. The young woman's excitement became evident. A new opportunity had arisen. She was now part of the Hero Association's team of reporters. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon. Recently, there had been an interview with Sealed Sword. The next goal involved meeting an individual called Snake. Outwardly, he remained calm, but internally, unease grew. The association had advanced resources for tracking information, making the possibility of an encounter more real by the second. Even so, the news was celebrated, and he promised something special to commemorate the occasion. The priest and the mage continued to observe his every move. The transformation happened swiftly, catching the two opponents by surprise. Tentacles emerged from the shadows, rushing toward the enemies without giving them time to react. The mage summoned spiritual creatures, sending them into battle. But the masked man demonstrated complete control over the situation, easily eliminating the enemy's attacks. Seeing this, the priest analyzed the situation, still believing he could turn the battle around. The mage assured that his creature had enough power to face any high-ranking threat. Yet even against such an enemy, the masked man showed no hesitation. Every move was calculated and efficient. His attack was delivered with precision, resulting in the priest's defeat. The mage expressed shock at the scene. The ability to wield multiple skills at once was a reality for this individual. The priest attempted to negotiate. There were rewards for those who chose a more flexible approach. The masked man remained unmoved. Justice allowed no compromises. Realizing the inevitability of the situation, the priest resorted to a last-ditch effort. A small capsule was quickly brought to his mouth, but before he could swallow it, an interference occurred. His original intent was thwarted. The priest's eyes reflected surprise and indignation. A hidden blade was revealed. The spear of judgment was finally awakened. Its power radiated intensely. The masked man's resolve remained firm. Analyzing the situation, he saw the need for an immediate response. The battle had reached its decisive moment. A brilliant manifestation of power illuminated the entire area. Energy gathered into a series of shimmering spears, ready to be unleashed. The priest declared aloud that judgment was about to take place. The spears began to chase the masked man, who retreated swiftly, trying to avoid the attack. His rapid movements were not enough to completely evade them. One of the spears pierced his leg, causing a brief moment of pain. The priest watched with satisfaction, hoping his opponent would continue running in desperation. The masked man understood the threat. Even a small wound revealed the destructive potential of those spears. The illuminated environment allowed the light weapons to track his position with ease. A risky plan was needed. A strategy came to him in an instant. He would compare his speed with that of the light spears. The priest, confident, stated that nothing could be faster than light. For him, that was an unquestionable truth. However, the masked man activated his superbrain, using his analytical ability to find a solution. The plan formed in seconds. The priest did not realize it, but he was already surrounded by the masked man's shadows. His movements became imperceptible. A shadow teleportation technique was executed repeatedly, each time faster. The priest had no time to react. Not understanding what was happening, he let out a hesitant laugh. His certainty of victory vanished when he saw the intense glow of his own spears coming toward him. The end was upon him. His attempt to recover was thwarted. His hands trembled as he tried to activate his healing abilities. A warning was issued immediately. Any attempt would be punished repeatedly. His defeat was inevitable. Absorbing that luminous ability was a simple task. The new power was integrated into his arsenal. Heart of Light, a high-tier ability, granted enhanced resistance and light manipulation. Fusing that power with his previous abilities seemed like the ideal path. The incident with the blue capsule had nearly compromised everything. The mage lay on the ground. His abilities had to be absorbed as well. It was an earth manipulation power, classified among the most stable. Before he could act, the sound of aircraft echoed through the area. The Hero Association had taken control of the situation. Without hesitation, the masked man returned to his original form, concealing his identity before it could be discovered. Reporter Lin Naik-sui reported the strange noises heard earlier. The scene before them shocked everyone. The state of the location was unrecognizable. The leaders of the holy organization had been neutralized. Both the priest and the mage were incapacitated. The sight of the defeated bodies triggered an immediate reaction in the reporter. The unexpected experience was too much for her stomach. Unable to control herself, she ran to a corner. Her discomfort was noticed by Yang Xie, who found her in that embarrassing moment. Embarrassment flushed her face red. Her attempt to hide her shame was thwarted by Yang Xie's keen gaze. He smiled, assuring her that it was no big deal. She remained beautiful regardless of the situation. The cameraman did not miss the remark. In seconds he understood there was no chance for him. While the rescue team worked to free the hostages, the reporter regained her composure. The story had to be covered immediately. Even amidst the chaos, the masked man remained silent, watching from afar. In his hands, the essence of Heart of Light shimmered faintly. The journey was only beginning. Now the elemental abilities were complete. Water, fire, earth, and air. The path to freeing his sister was finally becoming possible. Satisfaction grew with the certainty that his mysterious organization was getting stronger. The name had already been chosen, Dragon. The ambulance arrived at the hospital to treat the victims. Nearby, a young man remained beside his sister, still fragile, his concern evident on his face. However, upon seeing his master, he felt immediate relief. The masked man made a discreet gesture, signaling that silence must be maintained, as the nurse under mind control could not notice his presence. Meanwhile, a child nearby caught the protagonist's attention, prompting him to ask who she was. The young man explained that she was his sister and that he believed there was no more hope for her. However, upon examining her, the masked man realized that, fortunately, his arrival was timely, as his healing ability could save her. Tears of relief streamed down the brother's face as he watched her recover before his eyes. The protagonist advised him to take good care of the girl and to keep the healing a secret. Additionally, he handed him a considerable amount of money to support himself. He recommended that he join the Hero Association. The young man hesitated as he had no abilities, but the issue was quickly resolved when the masked man granted him a unique mid-tier power called Forge. Unable to contain his happiness, the young man promised that he would never disappoint his master. As he stepped out of the ambulance, the protagonist returned to his original form, only to be surprised by the young reporter, who suddenly appeared, exhausted from searching for him. She wanted to know where he had gone, but after so much effort, she decided it was no longer worth arguing with him, as the most important thing was that everyone was safe. During your conversation, she informed him that the association was taking control of the situation and that those without abilities would be removed from the area. The masked man reflected on the large orphanage family and wished for them all to grow up well. But before he could say anything more, he was caught off guard by the young woman, who stepped closer and stole an unexpected kiss. His face instantly turned red as she smiled in satisfaction, thanking him for everything he had done. Despite his reluctance, she had to leave, as she had been summoned for a team meeting. Before departing, she assured him that they would meet again in a few days. The protagonist sighed, frustrated that once again, she had taken the initiative. After boarding the plane and landing at Jeju Airport, he went directly to the hospital, where he watched over his sleeping sister. The decisive moment had arrived. He raised his hand toward her and activated the healing ability, causing its light to fill the entire room. After performing the technique, he waited for some response from his sister. When he noticed no change, he felt deeply disappointed. In a desperate act, he called out to his sister, hoping for any reaction. He considered the possibility of recovery, even though he did not believe it was viable. Observing more closely, he noticed the presence of blue lights surrounding her body. Upon analyzing further, he realized these lights were rapidly expanding, absorbing his spiritual and mental energy to strengthen themselves. The time available to awaken his sister was decreasing with each passing moment, making it impossible to maintain the same approach. He needed to act more boldly. With this decision, he understood that it was necessary to enhance his combat abilities. To achieve this, he chose to strengthen 3 techniques: transformation, cloning, and metal control. He upgraded both transformation and cloning to rank C. By merging these abilities, he aimed to reach rank S. Kneeling before a high-level creation, he contemplated the achievement of evolving his metal control. He felt more prepared to find that individual whose face he had never been able to see. With no alternatives, he headed to the location of the enigmatic meeting. In the body of Hero SAR Spicy, he noticed the passage of time as he traveled through another dimension. As soon as he emerged, he was greeted by a man dressed in elegant clothing and a top hat, who welcomed him, mentioning that it had been a long time since he last heard from him. The man asked if he had any new information. Crossing his arms, the hero revealed that, as requested, he had gathered data on Yuje. The man warned that if the information was accurate, the corresponding payment would be substantial. The protagonist began detailing information about himself and his clones as if they were distinct members of the organization. However, the man was already aware of the existence of Sealed, Sword, and Snake. The hero also emphasized that those individuals used dual abilities, which piqued the man's interest. Showing curiosity, the man in the top hat sought to understand the situation better. Seizing the moment, the protagonist displayed a vial, claiming it contained something of medicinal value. And when the mysterious man reached out to take the vial, restraining that ability, the protagonist quickly closed his hand, stating that even with abilities, they could obtain another. Still, the strange man seemed completely convinced. However, the protagonist had a plan regarding this and made it clear that his ability was bodily. After ingesting the liquid substance, he demonstrated an impressive power. He stated that he had made an agreement with Lord Yuji regarding that ability. The man now realized the information was true and found it unbelievable. He wanted to know more about the materials used, but the hero had little to disclose. The masked man had to pay for the information, as it was not something trivial. Thus, he handed over a few blue pills. However, the hero still had a question. Recently, he discovered that his body emitted blue lights. The man explained that it was merely a common side effect and that there was no reason for concern. Before leaving, the masked man expressed his expectation of meeting him again. With that, he opened a rift in space-time and disappeared. Having achieved his objective, the protagonist focused solely on his concern for his sister, fearing that her mental energy would be consumed. Upon leaving the body of Hero SAR Spicy, he noticed him in a corner. It was then that he saw the man's daughter calling for her father. Without much ceremony, he tossed the vial containing the blue pills to him. Still unconscious, The man was warned to moderate his use of those pills. As he disappeared, the little girl continued searching for her father, who remained leaning against a spot. Worried, she asked if he had spent the night on the rooftop. Regaining consciousness, the man apologized to his daughter, explaining that he was exhausted and had accidentally fallen asleep. Curious, the child wanted to know what that vial with the blue pills was. Startled for a moment, the father quickly grabbed the vial, raised his arm, and warned his daughter that it was not a toy. Doubt lingered in his mind, as he did not recall having that encounter, even though the pills were there. He decided to ignore his questions and take his daughter out to celebrate her birthday with a cake. Meanwhile, in another residence, someone noticed it was already late and wanted to check on what their father was doing. Upon entering his office, they realized he was no longer there. They then decided to rummage through some documents. Finding something relevant on a small table, they began examining it closely to understand what kept their father working late into the night. That was when they saw that it was the defense plans for the white cavities. They felt this could be their great opportunity to become a world-class hero. Switching the scene entirely, he was now at work, standing next to a printer. This piqued the curiosity of his friends, who joked about whether he still remembered the way to work. Soon someone appeared claiming to be a friend of Fan Pang. When the chubby man picked up a flyer labeled "Wanted," the seventh cousin, he became extremely excited. However, his friend shattered his expectations by explaining that it was actually a code. Their banter came to an abrupt end when an alarm sounded, signaling a monster invasion. While some people ran, others crouched to protect themselves. The protagonist realized that the attack was happening at the address where Xui and the girls lived. Panicked, he grabbed his phone and called to find out where she was. Over the phone, the woman told him she was in the condominium. However, she didn't have time to say much as the attack had begun. Through the phone, he could hear that the situation was dire. His friend Peng wanted to know about Sister Lai. When the protagonist started running desperately, Peng also wanted to understand the reason for such urgency. He ran as fast as he could, as he did not want to lose her under any circumstances. As he got closer, the hero noticed the presence of a giant rat. It was an A-rank monster, capable of emitting deafening screams to attack its enemies. The protagonist knew that to defeat a monster of this level, at least 3 A-rank heroes were required. That being said, the heroine Flamer Butterfly and the B-rank heroine Green Tempest appeared. They were positioned above when the massive monster noticed their presence. The monster began growling and emitted an intense vibration toward Flamer Butterfly. At the last moment, she was saved by Green Tempest. Worried about her friend, Green Tempest scolded Flamer Butterfly, asking her not to do such reckless things. She was upset because she did not want her friend to expose herself to unnecessary danger. Suddenly, a loud crash and cries for help caught their attention. Looking to the side, they saw 2 girls in danger. One was hanging, and the other was trying to hold on to her. The young girl who was hanging begged her friend, Isu, to let her go and not risk her own life. However, Isu found it unacceptable to abandon someone she considered a friend. The unbelievable happened. As Su tried to hold on to her friend, a metal structure fell on her arm. The pain was unbearable. Unable to endure it, she let go of her friend, and both fell. Still in free fall, she was saved by Flamer Butterfly. As she opened her eyes and saw the red-haired heroine, she could hardly believe she was alive. The scene was being broadcasted, and everyone realized that Flamer was not just a pretty face. However, the reporter was horrified at the fate of the other girl, who was still falling with no protection. She continued to fall until a shadow passed by swiftly. The blonde reporter could hardly believe that someone had managed to save the young girl in time. At that same moment, the heroine Green Tempest warned everyone to be cautious. The giant rodent was initiating its sonic attack against the helicopter where the reporter was. Green Tempest needed to act quickly, so she activated Gale Explosion. With this, she managed to save the helicopter from imminent danger, but used up a significant amount of her power. Meanwhile, the hero, still in disguise, was holding his beloved. He carefully placed her on a bench. Realizing that she was weak, he touched her face, feeling that he had taken too long to act. Before leaving, he made sure to stabilize her vital points. After that, he took off his cape and placed it over her to protect her from the cold and ensure her well-being. The young woman slowly opened her eyes, realizing that she was still alive. The protagonist simply watched her, surprised as she asked him to continue being good. He replied that he was just passing by, which was why he saved her. Placing his feet back on his metallic board, he left while the young woman waved her arms toward him. She thought that man was very strange. Sometimes he seemed good, sometimes not. The first time, he inspired trust. However, the protagonist had one more task to accomplish, creating another clone. This time, he granted the clone the abilities Heart of Light and Ice Queen. He made sure that his clone took the form of a woman. After the transformation, Rabbit, a member of the Judgment Organization, appeared. He explained to her that her mission was to save people in danger and prevent the number of victims from increasing. Meanwhile, he himself would take care of the giant rodent. He found that monster very strange. Atop a building, he spotted another hero. From the long ponytail and reddish hair, he recognized her as the fighter of explosive fists. Reporter Alvera and the young woman noted that she was an A-rank heroine who had been absent for the past few years. Viewers went wild upon seeing the fighter of explosive fists once again. She was pleased to realize that many of her admirers still remembered her. The protagonist, watching from above, noticed that there were already several heroes at the scene, which allowed him to simply assess the situation. The fighter of explosive fists analyzed the giant rodent. She noticed that it opened its mouth and began emitting sound waves. Green Tempest tried to warn her that those waves were extremely powerful. However, Explosive Fists did not care and decided to face the attack head-on. It seemed like a test to measure the strength of her opponent. The reporter was quite scared by the heroine's approach, but everyone who knew her understood that this was her fighting style. The giant rodent continued causing destruction and noise. The heroine only felt slightly dizzy from the attack before becoming enraged and launching a barrage of punches. She struck the monster multiple times in succession, forcing it to step back a few paces. Looking at it, she asked if the rat wasn't going to scream anymore. The giant monster did not appear to be intimidated. Explosive Fists had no intention of letting him go so easily. She grabbed the rat's tail and began spinning it around. The 360-degree motion seemed entertaining to her. After that, she hurled the monster a fair distance away. The heroine's extreme actions made the protagonist's clone, now in the form of Rabbit, find the situation somewhat peculiar. Rabbit observed without fully understanding, but remained focused on protecting the citizens. The young people she had saved felt embarrassed upon realizing they were being rescued by such a beautiful woman. After placing them safely on the ground and turning her back, she introduced herself as a member of the judgment organization and revealed her name, Rabbit Hand. The people around her found her extremely attractive. However, her priority was to check on the victims of the giant rodent. She approached one of the heroines and asked how they were doing after the fall. She was informed that there were some injuries, so Rabbit used her healing ability. Everyone watched as she treated Flamer Butterfly's wounds. Noticing their stares, she asked if anyone needed assistance getting to a shelter. Meanwhile, the rat emitted even louder sounds. Some heroes were affected by the high-pitched noise. The protagonist realized that the monster had started absorbing the souls of those around it. That enormous rat had to be stopped before it absorbed too many souls. If nothing was done, it would only grow stronger. The heroines noticed that after absorbing the souls, the rat became more agitated. Additionally, all of the giant rat's wounds had been healed. Against this soul-devouring rat, Explosive Fists still didn't stand a chance. For Green Tempest, staying uninvolved was the best option. Explosive Fists believed she could handle the rat alone. With that thought, she charged at it, calling it a big useless rat. At that moment, she was willing to sacrifice herself if necessary. All she wanted was to defeat it, and thought she had succeeded right then. However, she was caught off guard when its tail swung dangerously close to her ribs. In a difficult situation, trembling from the pain, she found the rat even more despicable than before. With its tail, it hurled her away. Despite being an A-rank heroine, she was sent flying a great distance. Everything was being broadcast live, and people feared she might not have survived. However, she lifted her head and told the rat that wasn't enough to defeat her. Nearby, her friend approached, visibly worried. Explosive Fists didn't understand what her friend was doing there. She wasn't part of the plan, but even as a lower-ranking heroine, she wasn't about to leave her friend alone. It was a mix of anger, frustration, and gratitude, but Explosive Fists remained silent. The beautiful young reporter questioned what she was witnessing. Could the A-rank heroes really protect the city? The enormous rat was about to attack the two in a way they wouldn't be able to defend against. With some irritation, the masked man asked how that rat dared. He managed to shift the monster's attention toward the heroes. The two masked figures from the Zodiac watched closely. As always, the reporter was still shocked by Yuji's attacks. The question that lingered was, who was that beautiful masked woman standing next to him? Explosive Fists wanted to know what those two masked figures were capable of. From above, Fleet maintained his solid mass while launching several metal spears at the giant rat. Some of these spears struck the monster directly, making it recoil for a moment. Explosive Fists then realized that the rat had the ability to absorb souls to regenerate its wounds. Given this, Green Tempest suggested tying the monster's mouth shut to prevent it from continuing to heal. However, her friend strongly disagreed, believing that strategy could be too dangerous. As they debated the best way to deal with the creature, the battle between the masked man and the giant rat raged on. Explosive Fists continued to observe intently, trying to find an effective method to take down the enemy once and for all. For a moment, it seemed like the situation was under control. However, the giant monster let out a deafening roar, shaking the entire area around it. Reacting quickly, the protagonist raised a massive metal plate, creating a barrier to contain the destructive sound. Even so, it wasn't enough to completely block out the noise. Realizing the danger, he ordered Rabbit Hand not to let the rat open its mouth again. Without hesitation, the heroine obeyed and began creating a tornado of snowflakes around the enemy. The rat's body was slowly enveloped in ice, causing its movements to become increasingly sluggish. The spectators, watching the battle in real time, began to recognize the strength of Rabbit Hand and concluded that she was an A-rank heroine. Shortly after, the rat was completely frozen, transformed into a massive block of ice. However, even in this form, it still seemed to absorb souls and regenerate its wounds. Explosive Fists tried to attack it but realized that the monster continued to recover. With this, everyone came to the conclusion that they needed to stop its energy absorption somehow. It was necessary to neutralize it quickly so that the masked man could deliver the final blow. Up high, the masked man decided to use his most powerful technique, Metal Storm. The giant rat tried to resist, but it was cornered. Meanwhile, Rabbit Hand kept her technique active, causing snowflakes to fall over the monster, further reinforcing the freezing effect. During this time, the protagonist awakened a new A-rank ability, Soul Devourer. Holding an orb in his hands, he realized that this power was similar to the healing ability, but much more destructive. Inside the city, people were in panic over the events, but the reporter remained calm, narrating every detail of the battle. The camera showed the masked man floating on a metallic bar, drawing even more attention from the spectators. The blonde reporter, excited, waved her arms and shouted in the hope of getting an interview with him. Meanwhile, viewers noticed that Lord Ujai had lifted the rat and ascended with it beyond the clouds. Looking up, Explosive Fists felt a strange sensation. To her, the presence of the masked man conveyed an even greater power than that of the devouring rat itself. While the two discussed this, they realized that something was approaching. An unknown enemy, moving quickly, appeared before them. Without hesitation, the mysterious figure raised their hand and launched a direct attack against the two heroines. Green Tempest instinctively raised her hand, fearing what this sudden attack might be. An intense light illuminated everything around them, making it impossible to see for a brief moment. However, as soon as the brightness faded, the two realized that it was not actually an attack, but a healing power cast in their direction. Curious to know who was responsible for this ability, they looked at the striking-looking young woman. The beautiful Rabbit Hand then introduced herself, explaining that she was part of the Judgment Organization. Meanwhile, a helicopter hovered over the area, recording everything about the mysterious healing ability she had demonstrated. The live broadcast displayed both the scene of Lord Yuji and the heroes present at the location. Explosive Fists, intrigued, wanted to know more about Judgment, a new hero agency that seemed to be gaining prominence. The reporter excitedly narrated the fact that new ability users were emerging in the city and that now 2 members of this organization had been revealed. Green Tempest, impressed by the beautiful Rabbit Hand, could not hide her excitement. On the other hand, Explosive Fists felt that they had completely stolen the spotlight. Meanwhile, distancing himself from the chaos, the protagonist had something else in mind. He knew that his nephew wanted to meet with him, and his curiosity about this meeting was growing. During this time, his clone informed him that its time had run out. The protagonist found this convenient since the ability orb he had granted the clone would return directly to his main body. Additionally, he realized that even the clone's memories had been absorbed along with its energy. From these memories, he concluded that the man who had been staring intensely at Rabbit Hand was utterly repugnant. However, he was no longer interested in such behavior and had no intention of interacting with women solely out of superficial interest. Meanwhile, down below, his lazy nephew was simply enjoying life without a care. Naive, he did not even seem concerned about his own public image. Even so, he noticed that something strange was happening in the forest around him. Someone was watching his movements. Despite this, he ignored the feeling and descended to meet the young man, who quickly ran in his direction. Although he heard some unusual noises around, he chose not to pay attention to them. After that, he began conversing with his godfather, mentioning that he had heard strange sounds and was unsure who they could be. Ignoring any possible danger, the masked man remained focused on the reports delivered by the young man. Excited, the boy wanted to know if the monster world had special beings that had yet to be revealed. However, the godfather, without responding directly, handed him another portion of abilities. Without hesitation, the young man took the vial and drank it all at once. Tasting the potion, he commented that it had a flavor similar to roots mixed with chocolate tears. He had always believed that sour medicines were more effective. Right after ingesting the potion, his body began to undergo a transformation. He quickly became a C-rank werewolf. His senses and vision became incredibly sharp, allowing him to perceive his surroundings with much more clarity. While he was still adjusting to his new form, the masked man spoke words that put him on alert. He ordered the young man's father to step out from behind the bushes. The small wolf froze, feeling a chill run down his spine, and his fear grew even more when he saw his father's. The young wolf, still recovering, pleaded with his father to stop. He stated that he had already received enough discipline and didn't need more punishment. However, the man ignored his words, ordering him to stay silent and not come down from the wall. To him, that son had always been disobedient. Since birth he had never shown any special ability, and now suddenly he had acquired one with ease. The father had no idea that in reality, his son had possessed a secret ability for a long time. Even so, the boy insisted that this was not a problem. Having one or two abilities didn't make much of a difference. These words piqued the curiosity of the leader of judgment. He wanted to know if even a ranked individual could develop a second ability. Even the cunning fox that accompanied him couldn't resist and ended up asking the same question. Seizing the moment, the masked man opened his arms and confirmed that it was possible. However, there was much more to it. The man, even more intrigued, asked for more details. Without hesitation, the protagonist took out a small blue pill and asked if he knew what it was. The boy's father examined the object carefully, but said he had never seen anything like it. The masked man then explained that he wasn't even aware of the hidden mysteries within his own organization. The big names of the underworld used those pills all the time. Concerned, the man wanted to know if the masked man also produced them. Upon hearing that he merely traded them with his son in exchange for information, his expression darkened. With no alternatives, he ordered the young man to come down from the wall immediately. Proudly, the wolf told his father that a hero named Bing Chuan consumed large quantities of those pills. The man, skeptical, didn't believe that something so small could cause significant side effects. Looking at the masked man, he wanted to know his real intention behind revealing so much information. The protagonist got straight to the point. He needed the man's help to enter the white cavity. If he succeeded, he would obtain an A-rank ability in return. Feeding the man's curiosity even more, the masked man explained his powers. He revealed that he acquired them through the second ring. He stated that it was a kind of ability genesis and that the crucial material for creating ability potions was monsters. The man, skeptical, wanted proof. Without hesitation, the protagonist produced flames in one hand and ice in the other. He said there was no better proof than that. The son, attentive to everything, began to worry. He feared that his own father would steal his position as an informant and earn a promotion. The father, however, paid no heed. With a serious look, he affirmed that anything good he acquired would be passed on to his children because they were family. Thus, he struck a deal with the masked man. Additionally, he said he would also take care of the hero Bing Chuan. Meanwhile, the protagonist climbed onto his metallic disc and departed. The scene shifts to a hospital, where the beautiful Niku was slowly awakening. Still a bit confused, she was surprised to see Yang seated by her side. Curious, she asked what he was doing there. The young man lightly touched her shoulders and replied that he hadn't been able to find her anywhere. Worried, he decided to look for her, and now wanted to know how she was feeling. Nei, still drowsy, said she had nowhere to go. Yang Xi then offered to help her, saying she could stay at his house. However, to his surprise, the young woman immediately refused. She said she couldn't live with him. Upset, she moved away and went to the window, where she stood lost in thought for a few moments. In her mind, the image of Lord Yuji appeared. That confused the protagonist. He observed her expression and didn't understand why she was so deep in thought. After a moment of silence, the young woman blushed. Embarrassed, she said that she had almost met a terrible fate. But at the last moment, Lord Yuji saved her life. Upon hearing this, Yang Xi's expression darkened. He didn't like what he had just heard. Overcome by an unfamiliar feeling, he grabbed Nei by the arms. Then he gently placed her on the hospital bed to rest. The young woman, surprised by the sudden action, found herself on all fours on the bed. Then she looked at Yang Xi and, confused, asked, "What exactly are you trying to do?" In that position, blushing, the young woman turned around and asked the protagonist what he was thinking. He simply remained silent, admiring the beauty of the girl. With an irritated tone, she warned that they couldn't do anything inappropriate in a hospital. After a while, the two were under the covers in the hospital bed. Contrary to what she thought, they simply lay facing each other. Both were embarrassed as they looked at one another. In a caring act, the young man asked her to sleep well, as he would help her with the move the next day. After everything was settled, the hero boarded a plane. While inside, he answered a call from his girlfriend, who was upset because she didn't know where the household utensils were. In the poorly organized kitchen, she couldn't find anything. The protagonist, still on the plane, told her she could use the credit card to buy whatever she needed. Even though he didn't want to, he had to hang up because the plane was about to take off. The man sitting next to him found the gesture sweet. As the plane took off, leaving the ground, the protagonist noticed that a friend was also on board. Seated beside him was the beautiful Qian Du Duo. Seeing the young woman, he thought she wouldn't recognize him. Inside the plane, there were other young people who became excited upon seeing the beautiful women. One of the young women asked the flight attendant if she could give them a piece of fabric. Unable to hold back, the red-haired girl asked if those men had never seen beautiful women before. What caught the protagonist's attention was that the flight attendant dropped the fabric on the floor. Immediately, she raised her hands and called for help. The plane had been taken over by a group of criminals. Several of them tried to keep the passengers calm with their reasoning. However, the protagonist could do nothing, as transforming would be too risky. One of the men noticed the protagonist staring at him and asked what he was looking for. He simply put his hand on his head, knowing he couldn't cause trouble. One of the criminals ordered the flight attendant to open the cockpit. Meanwhile, the protagonist was thinking about what could happen next. They acted as if they already knew the pilot. However, the flight attendant didn't understand why they wanted to take manual control of the flight. That agent told her to remain silent. He made it clear that he wasn't joking. As time passed, those men gradually took control of the entire flight. Even so, the elderly man sitting next to the protagonist thought that, before leaving this life, he wanted to take one last look at the view. Saying that, he turned to admire the beautiful young women. The protagonist thought that even in a situation like this, the man still prioritized looking at pretty women. For him, it was more important to understand those men better. The young woman beside him, the redhead, mentioned the White Tower. She explained that she was from Area 35, but the protagonist had no idea what she was talking about. The beautiful redhead explained that since the creation of Zurita, the 50th trafficking area, the 35th area had been invaded. Even after a meeting, the government did nothing publicly to stop the invasion. Now the protagonist understood why those men had resorted to such extreme and desperate actions. A bald man from the group noticed that the two were whispering. The young woman pleaded, saying she wouldn't talk anymore, but he didn't care. He grabbed her by the arms and threatened to throw her out of the plane. Slung over his shoulder, she begged him not to do such a thing. Our protagonist considered reacting, but he knew it wouldn't be the best course of action. However, he didn't have to do anything, as someone appeared and took control of the situation. Another person arrived, claiming to be the A-rank hero, Star Cape. Meanwhile, the man who saved the beautiful redhead was the A-rank hero, Captain Cigar. Many people on the plane were relieved to see the duo of Captain Cigar and Star Cape. For the group of criminals, however, the situation took a turn for the worse. Star Cape seemed well acquainted with those people. His power was so incredible that his cape, a soul-bound piece of equipment, had a consciousness of its own. Those criminals believed that man was a miserable traitor. However, the hero Star Cape paid them no mind. The men retorted, asking who he thought he was. One of them, who had the ability to turn his own body into a bomb, threatened to blow everything up. The heroes Star Cape and Captain Cigar were seen from afar as the plane was partially exploded. Now there was no other option but to try to land the plane cautiously. Captain Chudo asked everyone to put on their oxygen masks. He called Star Cape and asked what they should do. He said he wouldn't be able to save the entire plane, only a few people. With that, many began volunteering to go with him, even offering money, trying to stand out from the others. Everyone raised their hands, pleading to be chosen by the hero. However, the red-haired young woman simply thanked Captain Cherudo and tried to return to her seat with her friend. Starcake told his companion that he had an idea. The captain asked what it was about. With that, the two of them climbed onto the hero's cape and went outside the plane. The protagonist remembered that he could use a clone to stay outside the plane, so he created a shadow clone. It would be Lord Yuji. However, the plane's situation was getting worse by the second. Outside, Starcape warned Captain Charuto that he would need to use a lot of his ability to help everyone. With that, he began to inflate, as his ability was related to smoke. He produced a large amount of smoke, which transformed into a parachute to hold the plane. However, it was exhausting for Captain Charuto, who was now crouched on the ground, trying to recover some of his strength. Behind him, a traitor thanked him for all the effort and said he was quite a complicated person. When Captain Charuto looked back, the traitor said that, as an ability user, this was what he was supposed to do. The protagonist's clone noticed when that so-called hero tried to strike his friend from behind. Without much thought, the traitor attacked, saying he was sick of Captain Charuto's goody-two-shoes attitude. Everything happened so fast that the clone had no chance to stop it. However, the captain was executed by that ambitious and envious young man. After doing all that, the traitor admitted he had only done it out of frustration at having to share the spotlight. Jumping from that place, he headed back into the plane. Left behind was Captain Charuto in his final moments. The protagonist's clone arrived just in time, trying to heal him with holy light. However, the captain said it would be useless because the weapon was spiritual. That was something new for the protagonist, who had no idea what he meant. Still, Captain Charuto had a soccer game scheduled with his son at home. Seeing that he could do nothing, the clone was saddened. But inside the plane, Starcape had returned. When the passengers saw him, they were relieved. But the young hero's expression changed when someone asked about Captain Charuto. Acting swiftly, he grabbed the most beautiful women on the plane and left with them. One of them was a pink-haired girl, a friend of Kin Do-Do. The passengers, upon seeing that he had only taken the most beautiful ones, were disappointed. Meanwhile, outside, the clone, unable to save Captain Charuto, simply absorbed that A-rank ability. They noticed someone was outside the plane. Outside, using metal control, someone was determined to stop that plane, and they succeeded. As it neared the ground, the plane landed smoothly. When the passengers realized they had landed safely, they felt relieved. Many were asking where Captain Charuto was, The red-haired young woman was looking for Lord Yuji. Several ambulances arrived along with the hero Star Cape. Even a helicopter with reporters was narrating the events. No one fully understood what had happened, as they expected there to be many injured. The redhead accused that man and demanded to know where he had taken her friend Rue. The passengers also had no idea what had happened. Everyone wanted to know what had become of Captain Chiruto. Star Cape said that, in truth, Captain Chiruto was his friend, and that this was a rescue mission. He also claimed that, due to the great effort he had put in, he had used up too much of his energy and didn't make it. Feigning sadness, he said that under those circumstances, the only thing he could do was try to prevent the plane from crashing. Someone told him to stop acting. The masked man appeared, carrying Captain Chiruto in his arms. The red-haired young woman, upon seeing Lord Yuji, concluded that he was the one who had truly saved the plane. The young man said he had only given Captain Chiruto a helping hand, that the real hero was him, and that he had pushed himself to exhaustion. However, what people didn't understand was why he had such a severe wound on his chest. Pointing his finger at Star Cape, the masked man declared that it was his fault and that he should tell the truth about what really happened. The young man tried to play dumb. Because of that, the masked man revealed everything that had happened in the smallest detail. Star Cape was upset when he realized that everything he had done had been exposed. When that happened, his cape became stained, and people began to notice the evidence. Cameras and reporters wanted to know the truth. The man became stressed and frustrated for being so careless, so he confessed that he had done everything just to become more popular. However, the masked man wanted to know if he had any connection to the kidnappers from Area 35. The fake hero became even angrier when he realized that the masked man had discovered even that. His cape abandoned him. He said that he had sacrificed so many friends and yet had still failed. In a fit of rage, he unleashed a sandstorm on the masked man, hitting not only him, but also several reporters at the scene. After everything, the caped hero decided to tell the story of his youth. That cape had been a gift from his mother before she passed away. Born in Area 35, he had been very happy and thought that everyone lived the same way. But when he left there, he discovered that water could be sweet, that flowers could explode in vibrant colors, but also that the people from the second area were terrifying. Once they found out he was from Area 35, they began acting strangely toward him. Taking things to the extreme, they treated him with hostility several times. Because of that, he started searching for the truth. He discovered that the fault wasn't his. He created a false identity as a citizen of the second area and secretly sent information to Area 35. He continued explaining that, over time, he went from being an ordinary citizen to becoming an admirable A-rank hero. When he started enjoying people's admiration, he met Captain Cigar. It was unbelievable how effortlessly he could save people from difficult situations. The platinum-caped hero found it amusing and, at the same time, unfair. That's why he didn't mind creating a tornado to make all those people around him disappear. The red-haired young woman, Dudu, looked at the man and concluded that he was simply a lunatic. So, looking at Lord Yuji, she said that he planned to make everyone there vanish. The protagonist looked and saw that before that man, there was a great evil. The spiritual equipment he used was influenced by the emotions of its wielder. After eliminating so many people, his condition had worsened. Desperate, the young woman looked inside her dimensional bag, searching for an S-rank weapon. She wanted to help the Lord, however she couldn't find anything. Still, she noticed the Lord's hand trembling and asked if he was, by any chance, afraid. The protagonist didn't like her words. Being compared to a frightened coward was not exciting. The enemy, floating above the ground, told him that after taking so many lives, he had probably already eliminated several ordinary citizens. The man, half lunatic and looking disoriented, confessed that he had. To him, the lives of the random people he had saved in the past didn't matter. The protagonist couldn't believe that an A-rank hero had become a madman. He made it clear that when a victim started harming innocent people, they lost all reason and didn't deserve forgiveness. However, the platinum cape no longer cared about anything. He even gave the protagonist a few seconds to disappear from his sight. Opening his arms and starting a countdown, he gave him the chance to flee. The masked man, however, simply began using his metal control. The enemy's countdown continued. Then, out of nowhere, our hero appeared, carrying some kind of metal blade. The lunatic warned that he had no patience to count all the way to 0. Dudu noticed that the masked man had disappeared and assumed he had run away. But to her surprise, he was just a little above the enemy, ready to strike the core that floated above everyone. And in an instant, the power of the platinum cape was cut off. Several people who had been caught in the sandstorm began to fall. Meanwhile, the blonde hero asked what had happened to his sandstorm. Our protagonist managed to take control of the defenseless cape. Even though it was the first time he had used an S-rank ability to face a spiritual weapon of the same rank, he handled the situation. From above, he shouted for the redhead to find a way to save the people who were plummeting from the sky. Once again, she reached into her dimensional bag, throwing out some rare and extremely valuable eggs. However, she had no other choice. The The lives of human beings were worth more. When the eggs hit the ground, they transformed into a soft goo, cushioning the people's fall and preventing them from getting hurt. The lunatic hero couldn't believe those people were still alive. Frustrated, he demanded that the masked man return his cape. However, the protagonist noticed bullets whizzing past him, nothing he couldn't handle. Even realizing they were guided cutting bullets, he managed to deal with part of the problem. The lunatic hero, arms raised, blamed his cape for everything, saying he had been too careless. Now reunited with his cape after apologizing for letting it be captured, he was furious and wanted revenge on the kidnapper. With that, he charged full force at the protagonist, who ended up with a few scratches from the crazed man. He even tried to activate his healing power, but it was just as Captain Chiruto had said before. Since it was a spiritual weapon, that kind of damage couldn't be healed with normal abilities. The lunatic found it fascinating that the protagonist's wounds weren't regenerating. The protagonist, however, looked at the enemy's spiritual weapon and said it would be a waste if it didn't become his. The cape reacted to the protagonist's words. He reached into the man's pocket and grabbed a few blue pills. The protagonist noticed that the cape had a will of its own. It forced the pills down the throat of the crazed man. No matter how hard he tried to resist, he couldn't break free, and the cape forced him to swallow them all. He was furious, for thanks to the cape, he had once again ingested an absurd amount of pills. The protagonist noticed that the enemy's spiritual weapon was growing too much. He wouldn't be able to fly out of it. The cape then completely closed in, practically turning into a cocoon, trapping the protagonist inside it. The man felt like he was having terrible luck. He needed to fight to avoid being completely absorbed inside that strange cocoon. Inside, a shower of tiny stars began to fall. They stuck to the protagonist, and as he noticed they were heating up more and more, he suspected they might be explosive. Outside, everyone watched intently as a small explosion went off inside the cape. The redhead was in shock and began fearing for Lord Yuji's life. The blonde hero, with a look of disdain, told her to stop screaming, as he believed that man was already dead. The now loose cape opened, revealing only smoke. The young woman felt her heart sink and even doubted for a moment. However, when she looked again, she realized that the protagonist had built some kind of metal cocoon to protect himself. As he began to break free, the blonde hero couldn't believe he was still alive. The people watching were impressed by the masked man's skill. The redhead, who had previously been doubtful, now pretended she had always believed in her friend's potential. The protagonist stood still before everyone and revealed that he had only survived thanks to Captain Chiruto. The blonde man noticed something strange about the masked figure. Between his fingers there was a cigar. Seeing that object, the hero became enraged, as it reminded him of the general, someone he often referred to that way. Blinded by rage, he lunged at the protagonist. Without fear, the masked man raised his hand and promised that Captain Chiruto would have his revenge. Activating his metal absorption ability, he extended his hand toward the blonde hero, who immediately felt its effects. The metal in his body was stripped away before he could react. Now without a master, Star Cape seemed to be searching for a new owner. However, its own consciousness made that dangerous. The protagonist observed carefully and realized it was an extremely intelligent weapon. Since its previous owner hadn't been able to fully control it, it was now looking for someone stronger. He reflected for a moment. If he tried to claim that weapon, he would have to always be stronger than it. Otherwise, he would end up being devoured. Meanwhile, the people trapped in the slime created by the eggs began calling for help. The redhead looked at the protagonist and asked him to help rescue the survivors. However, he simply stepped onto his metal bar and flew away, telling her to wait for reinforcements. The scene then shifted to Captain Chiruto's backyard. A boy was playing alone when his ball rolled to the protagonist's feet. The boy looked at him and asked if he wanted to play soccer. The protagonist sighed before answering that, unfortunately, he couldn't. Then he pointed to a spot behind the child and said there was someone who wanted to play with him. The boy turned around and saw the figure of his father starting to form in the air, made of smoke. It was a clone carefully created by the protagonist, using Captain Chiruto's smoke core. In that moment, the captain's last wish was fulfilled. For one final time, he was able to play with his son. After everything that had happened, the clever duo recounted the details to her friend. She even described the way the Lord flew and dodged the guided attacks. However, she found it a shame that the hero Star Cape had left them in the desert. If it weren't for the news helicopter that passed by and rescued them, she didn't know what would have happened. Duo told Rong that fate had saved them and that they should make better use of their lives. The pink-haired young woman took the opportunity to mention that, a few days ago, she had received a letter addressed to their organization. The sender was a member of the Judgment Organization, but she couldn't see who it was since the delivery was made by the masked man, Snake. Being very sharp, the redhead quickly sensed Snake's presence and tried to warn her friend. Rong was startled when she turned around and saw the masked man. With a very serious tone, he asked why she was so frightened. The redhead, observing the man's mask and posture, said he looked familiar. She mentioned that she had heard her sister, Blanche, talk about him before. Wasting no time, she revealed that she was a friend of Lord Yuji and questioned why Snake was so serious, considering they both belonged to the same organization. Trying to lighten the mood, the redhead took a few steps forward, curious to see where the valuable items were. However, her pink-haired friend was suddenly pulled back by the masked man. Noticing that they had stopped, the redhead looked back and asked what was going on. The protagonist, on the other hand, wasted no time and trapped the redhead in a small trap, knowing she was greedy and wanting to tease her a little. Concerned for her friend, Ron crawled to the edge to check on her. Meanwhile, the protagonist was mentally counting down. When he reached one, he heard the excited scream of the redhead announcing her newfound wealth. She eagerly called for her pink-haired friend to come down quickly and see it all. The redhead's satisfaction was immense as she admired the pile of treasures. The feeling she had was that she wanted to stay there forever. Looking down, Snake informed them that those goods belonged to the Judgment Organization and that this was the reason he had called them both. Despite the overwhelming riches, the redhead was ready to hear his proposal. Without hesitation, she stuffed the entire pile of treasure into her spatial bag. Looking at her friend, she asked if there was any special reason why the organization was entrusting so much money to their guild. Ron, deep in thought, speculated that it might be because their organization was the largest in the commercial sector. She explained that ability users didn't rely solely on power to become strong, but also on support and weaponry. Very excited, the redhead concluded that they had the ability to craft weapons using materials from monsters. Her friend continued explaining that whenever the Judgment Organization needed equipment or weapons in the future, they would be the ones supplying them. The scene then shifted to a hospital. The protagonist's sister, the beautiful Fay Fay, was undergoing a transformation. For a few moments, she managed to open her eyes. However, she seemed to be in pain. The protagonist, noticing her suffering, supported her with the power of his mind. The plane landed at the airport, and the protagonist disembarked safely. Running toward him was his girlfriend, visibly worried. She was so beautiful that she turned heads wherever she went. As soon as she saw him, she gave him a tight hug, relieved after all the concern. The protagonist felt satisfied seeing all the men around glaring at him with jealousy. The young woman, however, didn't let it slide and gave him a scolding, saying he should have called to let her know he was okay. As they walked together, he tried to reassure her and asked her to go home first, as he needed to see his nephew. At young Liu's house, the boy was relaxing in the company of a few girls. They seemed quite stressed, complaining about the whereabouts of his father. However, he barely had time to drink a glass of water when suddenly, the protagonist activated his mental spirit expansion. The girls began to feel weak, almost to the point of fainting. Liu, startled, didn't understand what was happening, and in his shock, shouted, demanding to know who dared to splash water on his head. That was when he heard the voice of his godfather, who asked him if he wanted to pick a fight with him. Trying to play it cool, the rich young man attempted to explain, saying it was all just a misunderstanding. However, the protagonist quickly reminded him that, not long ago, he had said he would do exactly this. Without further ado, the masked man declared that he would grant the young man an official membership treatment. For that, he would perform a spiritual ritual. Then he flicked Liu's forehead lightly. Immediately, intricate symbols appeared in the air, forming well-defined patterns. This brought a strange sense of comfort to the young man, and thus, the contract was sealed. When Liu opened his eyes, he realized he was in a completely different place. Confused and uneasy, he asked his godfather where they were. With a serious tone, the protagonist explained that the spiritual contract had been sealed and that, at that moment, they were in the space between body and soul. The young man wanted to know if that was just a part of him and grew worried about the rest. With patience, the protagonist explained that this was the spiritual space where everything could be shaped by the power of the mind. Liu started to understand that he had become part of a spiritual contract. The masked man then asked him to feel the gem on his forehead. Closing his eyes, Liu focused on his consciousness. As he did, he was able to see a new space. Even he was startled by it all. It was simply incredible. Meanwhile, his godfather was already positioned at one of the highest points in the area. From above, he called out to Liu and asked him to look in his direction. The young man had never imagined that the organization could be so powerful. The protagonist explained that to receive the treatment of an official member, he would have to stay there for a while. Very excited, Liu wanted to know what he had to do. However, the man simply said he would grant him the treatment of an official member. And he added that, at the moment, the position of rat was vacant. The carefree young man ran toward the pillar with the throne designated for the rat participant. However, he was abruptly stopped by an invisible barrier and fell to the ground. Frustrated, he looked back and asked his godfather what was going on. The masked man replied that he shouldn't be so hasty. Although the rat position was vacant, it was equivalent to none other than Lord Yuji himself. The protagonist explained that the position was being contested by several candidates. Shocked, the young man realized he would have to compete, possibly even against his own father. Jixi Zhang, of course, was among the contenders, but the final decision would rest solely with the leader. The nephew complained but was told that he wouldn't receive any special assistance to make his entry easier. Resigned, he understood that he would have to fight for the position on his own, but despite the challenge, he wasn't willing to waste that opportunity. The masked man then revealed that his next mission would be to bring the hero Bing Chuan-yang to him. Liu, excited, told the masked man that he already had plans for when he finally took on the role of Rat. His greatest wish was to meet Sister Rabbit Hand. Ever since he saw her on TV, he had been completely fascinated by her. The protagonist was annoyed to realize that his nephew actually wanted to date his clone. The result was a well-aimed kick that sent the young man flying. The scene then cut to the protagonist's home. He was listening attentively to his girlfriend as she talked about her day. Among the topics, she shared some useful information about the heroine's sealed sword. However, what truly caught the protagonist's attention was the way his girlfriend served the food. With a slight blush on her face, she placed a piece of ready-to-eat BBQ chicken on the table. The little glutton went crazy at the sight. Slightly embarrassed, the young woman asked what he thought of her beauty. Caught off guard, the protagonist stumbled over his words and barely managed to respond. She then reminded him that she had promised him a surprise and that it wasn't just an ordinary meal. Next, she picked up a chicken drumstick and served it to her boyfriend with care. Meanwhile, she continued talking about the latest news regarding Sealed Sword. Yang showed great interest in the subject. His girlfriend explained that, apparently, the heroine had been working for a secret organization before she disappeared. Things didn't add up, as her reputation had always been impeccable. After all, she was an A-rank heroine. Quickly, his girlfriend started feeling jealous of the attention the protagonist was giving to the case. Suspicious, she questioned why he was asking so many questions about Sealed Sword. Noticing the situation, he tried to justify himself. He said his interest wasn't in her, but in the heroine's unique charisma. Maybe something was happening behind the scenes that no one knew about. His girlfriend, however, wasn't convinced and stared at him with eyes that looked ready to strangle him. The clever little glutton quickly changed the subject. He started praising his girlfriend's cooking skills, trying to ease the tension, but the young woman was still upset. She was visibly frustrated about not having powers and not being able to help anyone. Hearing this, the protagonist stood up and placed his hands on her shoulders. After assuring her that he would investigate the situation, he ended the conversation with a kiss. After the kiss, the young woman still seemed to have some doubts. The protagonist, gently fixing her hair, told her she was perfect. Feeling embarrassed about her behavior, she still sensed some sincerity in his words. To reassure her, the protagonist explained that his curiosity about Sealed Sword was merely like that of a reporter. Even though she was suspicious, his girlfriend ended up accepting the explanation. He insisted, saying that all reporters were like that, and that he had no interest in that heroine. To him, his girlfriend was simply the best in the world. However, he still had some concern that she might find out that, in some way, he had absorbed her abilities. After that moment, the protagonist decided to check his emails on the computer. Among the messages, there was a letter he had sent to Lord Yuji. After that, he decided to search for more information on the internet. Looking up the hero SAR Spicy, he found some information but realized he would have to pay to access more details. He noticed that most of the available data were things he already knew. However, he was surprised to see that even reports about the time he inhabited the hero's body had been recorded. Intrigued, he decided to search for the hero Bing Chuan. To his surprise, there was absolutely no information available. Someone was deliberately hiding all data about him. Not giving up, the protagonist then searched for Blanche. He noticed that some information was available. The cost to access it was exorbitant, around 700,000. The records contained both true and false data mixed together. What impressed him the most was discovering that Fake Boxer was part of the Round Table Economic Company. The protagonist concluded that perhaps the company didn't know he was working with the Saint, or maybe the organization itself was hiding something important. Another piece of information caught his attention. Rumors suggested that Snake was in a relationship. Moreover, there was also valuable information about Lord Yuji, Snake, and Rabbit Hand. What truly shocked him was the price of that information, around 30 million. He then realized that the sealed sword was being hunted, and a large part of the reason was because of him. The scene shifts to another location where a heated argument was taking place between a father and his son. Demon Dragon demanded that his father explain why he had changed his mind and was no longer sending him to White Cavity. After all, that was a promise his father had made to him. Angry, the man stated that he had made his decision, and there was nothing the son could do to change it. The father justified that the change of plans wasn't about him, but rather about the defeat he had suffered at the hands of Yuji. But Demon Dragon felt there was something suspicious about the way his father was protecting that man. Even so, the father insisted that he needed to understand the difficult decisions a father sometimes had to make. Unwilling to accept the justifications, the son turned his back and stormed off in fury. The father, on the other hand, regretted that his son couldn't understand the truth. After all, White Cavity wasn't just a monster territory, But Demon Dragon, feeling hurt, didn't want to hear anything else. As he left the room, he found his younger brother waiting outside. The boy seemed curious to know about the conversation that had just taken place. Demon Dragon told his brother that their father wanted the hero Bing Chuan to take part in the attack on White Cavity. He expressed his frustration, saying it seemed like their father cared more about the hero than about his own children. Wasting no time, young Liu decided to contact the masked man to share the news. However, his lack of experience caused him to trip and fall to the ground as soon as he arrived. Annoyed, the masked man asked why he had appeared so suddenly. Excited, the nephew explained that his father was trying to send Bing Chuan to White Cavity. The protagonist immediately sensed that the man was scheming something. However, the young man didn't know the exact details, as he had only overheard fragments of the discussion between his father and his brother. Even so, he suspected that his father's true goal was to deliver the hero directly to the masked man. With a brilliant idea, the protagonist decided that the hero should enter the cavity alongside him. The young man understood that his father probably had his own reasons for making such a request. However, the protagonist assigned him another mission, to ensure that his father's plan had no flaws. Satisfied with the task, the young man assured him that he would do everything correctly. After some time, now at home with his girlfriend at work, the protagonist decided that he needed to improve his abilities. He started by enhancing his transformation ability, followed by his clone technique, raising both to rank B. With the scrolls in hand, he began the upgrades. Now the transformation allowed him to change his appearance and clothes in just 0.01 seconds. The clone ability also evolved, allowing it to possess its own unique skill. Additionally, the Water Commander ability advanced to rank A, as did Fire Lord. After the enhancements, he decided that Dragon would be a good name for one of his clones and for a character within the organization. The scene shifts to a ship, where a deal was being made. The man negotiating with a young woman showed excessive curiosity about her life. After being reprimanded, he decided not to ask any more questions. The woman in question was none other than Sealed Sword, who had been operating in secret. She seemed to be watching a specific location while reflecting on Snake, who had used the identity of Fake Boxer. Suddenly, her peace was interrupted. Someone seemed to be hiding in the bushes, as if they had discovered her whereabouts. She quickly dodged as the enemies threw the body of a young man who had made a trade with her earlier. Sealed Sword was furious to realize that they were now targeting innocent people. The person pursuing her didn't seem to care who they had to eliminate in the process. She turned to face the enemy. If they wanted to fight, they should come out of the shadows and face her directly. However, the man didn't seem interested in giving her that advantage. He simply smiled and without warning, launched a direct attack at the heroine's chest. He declared that this would be her end. Sealed Sword felt the impact but remained silent. Before she could react, she heard a nearby voice asking if she was okay. Turning around, she saw a young woman approaching. It was Naixui, who looked at her with concern. However, before they could say anything else, new attacks were launched toward the young woman as well. Realizing she was under attack, Naixui cried out for help. Faster than a stray bullet, her boyfriend arrived to defend her. However, the protagonist was disguised and masked under the identity of Snake. He placed himself in front of Sealed Sword, while someone watched them from behind a tree. She looked at the attacker and stated that since he already knew who she was, he should at least start running. However, the man had the opposite reaction. He launched an attack using Chrysanthemum Key Explosion. The protagonist quickly blocked it with another ability but was impressed by the enemy's power. Even so, his priority was to defeat him before he could harm the girls. Sealed Sword, already feeling the lingering effects of the attack, immediately recognized the aggressor. The man was surprised to see that the heroine still remembered him. He stepped out from behind the tree, revealing his identity. Their relationship was complicated, as Blanche had personally captured him 2 years ago. Now she wanted to know how he had managed to escape from prison. With an ironic smile, he replied that he knew the right people. Moreover, he declared that he was now in S rank. Blanche was not willing to let him escape again. Determined, she vowed to capture him once more. Meanwhile, the protagonist analyzed the enemy's abilities. Indeed, he was much stronger than a simple A rank. To turn the situation in his favor, the masked man decided to bluff. He claimed that, besides the two of them, other members of the organization were on their way. The enemy hesitated for a moment but still believed he could eliminate them before any reinforcements arrived. The protagonist, realizing the rival's stance was dangerous, decided to reveal a bit of his true power. Blanche felt guilty and suggested that they should flee while she stayed behind to slow him down. However, upon witnessing the protagonist's display of strength and noticing Naixui pretending to call the Hero Association, the enemy backed off. The tension in the air increased. Faced with the possibility of reinforcements arriving, the man grew nervous and decided to flee. After the enemy retreated, Snake turned to Naixui and asked if she was actually calling the association or if it was just a bluff. Sealed Sword still had something to ask the masked man. She wanted information about the organization. However, he simply advised her to leave first. Naixui noticed that Blanche was upset after Snake left so abruptly. With a knowing look, she commented that people with great power, like her and Snake, always disappeared. Then Naixui insisted on taking Blanche to the hospital. The heroine refused. That's when the offer to take her to her house came up. At that moment, the protagonist appeared, pretending to be out of breath from running. He stopped and asked if that was the famous Blanche. The heroine was unsure of who he was. Naixui explained that he was her boyfriend. Blanche turned to the young man and explained that she had found the girl being attacked. Naixui added that she would take her home. The protagonist smiled and said it was fine. He offered to carry the heroine. Heading toward the couple's house, the protagonist carried their guest in his arms. She seemed exhausted, but thanks to his speed, they quickly reached their destination. His girlfriend, noticing the curiosity in the heroine's eyes, explained that she and her boyfriend had actually gone out for a walk. Understanding the situation, Blanche thanked them but soon showed concern. She knew she was being hunted and feared causing trouble for them. Naixu, trying to reassure her, mentioned that the heroine always sacrificed herself to save others. With her head down, Blanche stated that she had no involvement in the execution of Fate Boxer and did not work with the judge organization. To start a conversation, the protagonist commented that he had heard rumors about that man being connected to the saint. The heroine sighed and said that regardless of that, the real problem was that someone was trying to use the situation against her. The young man suggested that perhaps the judge organization itself was behind those rumors. Because of this, various rumors began to circulate. As a reporter, Naixui knew that all of this was connected to Lord Yuji. Blanche explained that recently, all ability users had started to fear that organization. This revelation took the protagonist by surprise. She continued, saying that they were probably after her because of the false rumor that she worked with the organization. Things had only reached this point because, according to Area 53, all ability users on that planet needed to be stabilized. The heroine explained that this was happening because the Hero Association frequently sent ability users to other cities, calling this transfer vacation. The protagonist then remembered the fighter Explosive Fists, who hadn't appeared in that city for a long time. Blanche mentioned the judge organization, stating that all its members were incredibly strong, but the most powerful among them was undoubtedly Yuji. Pretending ignorance, the young man asked what kind of person could spread so much fear. While listening to the answer, he reflected on the rumors surrounding Yuji and even the theories about a supposed relationship between them. To better understand the abilities of that organization, Blanche explained that years ago, on the planet Blue Celestial, a white cavity had suddenly appeared. Intrigued, the protagonist wanted to know if Blanche had gone to that city to confront the judge organization. He was surprised when she said it was the exact opposite. Her goal was to help. Slightly blushing, the heroine admitted that she had already encountered Snake from the organization, and the two had even fought a life-or-death battle. The protagonist thought to himself that things hadn't happened quite like that. He had simply appeared miraculously at the right moment. While he pondered, a sudden noise caught his attention. He turned around and saw that his girlfriend was fine. Now in another location, more precisely at the headquarters of the Fanhea corporate group, an important conversation was taking place. The father of a red-haired young woman was saying that he admired the judge organization. His daughter agreed with him and revealed that she also wanted to be part of that organization, so much so that she had already met Lord Yuji in person. Her friend Rong commented that the redhead was truly clever. Laughing, the company leader revealed that he already had a plan in mind. He intended to showcase his new S-rank weapon and invite Lord Yuji to see it. His daughter was extremely pleased to see the support she was receiving. However, deep down, her pink-haired friend didn't seem so convinced about the judge organization. The next morning, at the couple's house, the caring young woman had already prepared breakfast. As she served the meal, she was surprised by the protagonist, who hugged her affectionately. However, she informed him that she wouldn't be able to join them for breakfast because she had an important meeting. Blanche, the heroine, silently observed the intimate moment between the two. Before leaving, the protagonist's girlfriend asked Blanche to stay at the house until she had fully recovered. The heroine thanked them for the hospitality and care she had received, but insisted that she was already feeling much better. The protagonist tried to convince her to stay, reminding her that many people were still looking for her outside. However, as stubborn as she was, Blanche stated that her injuries were almost healed and that she needed to leave. The young man knew that he had secretly healed her wounds the night before. He didn't want her to leave like that. But before he realized it, she was already gone. After breakfast, he went to another place to train. From a distance, he noticed two people on a ship who seemed familiar to him. Using his water ability, he created large waves to approach. On the ship, there were a few girls and some young men. Among them were the redhead Duo and her pink-haired friend. Additionally, a flame dragon and a black swordsman dragon had also arrived. However, all attention was focused on a man dressed in white. Duo was visibly irritated with those people, recalling that years ago, they were nothing more than little lapdogs chasing after her. The The blonde-haired young man in white clothes responded that she should blame the Kian family for declining so quickly. Wrong, the pink-haired girl was annoyed by the man's arrogance and thought those people were despicable. The man in white didn't like her comment and, irritated, ordered one of his companions to take the pink-haired girl's bikini. In front of her, one of the accomplices was preparing to obey. From a distance, Dragon observed the situation attentively. The girls, upon noticing his presence, asked if the city was far away. Excited, they assumed he was a companion of Yujie. Dragon found their way of speaking somewhat strange, but confirmed that he was part of the organization. Meanwhile, some spectators took photos, believing his presence would make for big news. Ron, realizing the opportunity, quickly stated that the two were friends of Yujie and asked Dragon to take them away. However, the young man raised his hand and refused the request. Turning to the intruders, he declared that the ones who should leave were the three people threatening them. The man dressed in white with blonde hair did not like the provocation. He claimed to be from the Love Organization and ordered his companions to eliminate the problem. The first to advance was the Black Swordsman, but Dragon only looked in his direction, showing no fear at all. Some onlookers stopped to see what would come of it. The red-haired girl, looking up, couldn't comprehend what kind of attack was approaching. But in an instant, Dragon activated the water protector, creating a gigantic statue made of water. When he was attacked, he faced his enemies and asked if that was all the power their fire had. His opponent realized that his attack had simply been paused, and the counterattack was devastating. Dragon did all that with a single drop of water, which could also become a sharp weapon to wound his enemies. Another adversary entered the scene and stated that since Dragon was a water element user, he himself would heat things up. Convinced that he had the advantage by controlling the fire element, the man declared that he would teach his rival a lesson using the flaming dragon wand. Amused by his arrogance, the protagonist remarked that the man was not strong, just annoying. He thought that if he activated his Fire Lord ability, he would be able to control lower-level flames. As soon as he activated the ability, he watched as his rival was chased by his own dragon fire. Meanwhile, the curious onlookers continued recording and taking photos, surprised to see someone manipulating both fire and water at the same time. After resolving the situation, Dragon landed calmly. He turned to the pink-haired young woman and commented on how quickly their rivals had fled. Seizing the opportunity, the young woman requested a meeting with Yujie. Hearing this, Dragon, still wearing his mask, said there was a more effective way to settle that. The red-haired duo was curious and wanted to know what that solution was. Satisfied to learn that she could become part of the organization, duo showed immediate interest. Dragon revealed that, this time, he was there at the request of the Lord himself to offer the chance for new recruits to become external members. He reflected on how this world was even bigger than he had imagined, so he needed to better understand the 4 ocean territories. Duo quickly accepted the offer. The pink-haired young woman hesitated for a moment, but after confirming that it would not harm her, she also decided to accept. Thus, both received a gem in the middle of their foreheads, a sign of the spiritual contract that had just been formed. Later, Dragon's image appeared on television. He was seen doing his exercises while the news was being broadcast. Noticing the commotion, he became so annoyed that he dropped the weight he was holding. Hours later at night, the Fan High group organized an exclusive auction. The event took place in a huge mansion and gathered various important figures. The leader of the Fan High organization himself was present and asked the guests to take their seats as the auction was about to begin. However, the blonde young man who had caused trouble earlier was present in the auction area once again. His assistants were carrying something heavy, which caught the attention of some attendees. The blonde man seemed bothered by their rush to start the auction, as there were still few guests. The protagonist, upon seeing that miserable wretch, immediately recognized him as the same opponent from the previous day. The man raised his invitation and asked if no one was going to greet him. The red-haired girl, furious, questioned how he dared. She was not foolish enough to ignore what he was doing there. He responded that the situation of that family was even worse than he had imagined. They were so desperate that they were rushing to gather support. He explained that although the family's weaponry was good, the price to pay was far too high. Ron realized that he was doubting the firepower and legitimacy of the weapons. Meanwhile, the protagonist approached the young man and asked what he was doing there. The blonde man, without hesitation, said that he had connections with some superiors. The protagonist, being sharp, asked if he had ties to the Uruk family. Realizing that he had gotten himself into trouble since that was a lie, he had to find a way out. Dodging the question, he stalled for a moment before answering and then lifted his cloak. He began touching the blonde young man's weapons, picking up a blue light sword and touching 2 other items. The blonde asked if, by any chance, he knew his aunt. Evasive, the masked man said it was better for the young man to hurry and take a seat, as the auction was about to begin. As the event started, the protagonist decided to sit near the host. The first auction item was armor made from a blue centipede, capable of withstanding powerful attacks. Several bids were placed on the armor. The blonde thought everyone there was foolish, as the armor wasn't worth more than 5 million. The next item up for auction had an initial bid of 200 million. The young blonde was surprised, believing that item should have been the last one in the event. His two subordinates knew that the equipment belonged to an S-rank, 2-star monster. Ron watched intently as the bids reached 300 million. The red-haired girl knew that item was her grandfather's favorite. The host looked at the masked man and suggested that if he was interested, he should place a bid. The protagonist knew that his group only had 200 million available. The host, however, told him not to worry, as the family would place a bid to ensure the weapon was his. The blonde raised his arms and offered 310 million. The auctioneer warned that with a few more bids, the weapon would be his. At that moment, the masked man raised the bid to 315 million. The blonde hesitated but didn't want to lose and tried to counter the offer. In the end, the auctioneer announced that the item had been won by the masked man and congratulated him on purchasing the gloves. The third auction item was an S-rank 1-star piece of equipment, the black jade shield. Irritated, the young blonde grabbed his blue light sword and demanded that the auction be paused. He stated that before selling anything, the product should be examined to verify their authenticity. The protagonist crossed his arms, knowing that the young man was finally about to cause trouble. The pink-haired girl was worried because the jade shield was indeed made using an S-rank monster. Seeing the situation, the red-haired girl asked Yuji for help. He simply placed his hand on her head and told her to calm down, saying there was no need to worry. They just had to wait and see. As he spoke, the young blonde launched his attack on the armor. Something unbelievable happened, so he decided to attack again. That was when his blue light sword broke. Because of this, many of those present started to think that his sword was actually a fake. The red-haired girl grew suspicious that the masked man had known everything from the start. Aren't you even going to feel sick? The young man was devastated, now becoming a laughingstock. One of his subordinates noticed that the masked man had touched all of his weapons. Du, upon hearing this, was furious. She didn't want them to blame the blonde's faulty weapons on someone else. Meanwhile, the masked man quickly reached S-rank. The atmosphere grew tense, and everyone agreed that something was wrong with all of the blonde young man's weapons. After being outmatched, he finally admitted the truth after testing his other weapons. Panicking, he grabbed a mask and a horn and began to blow into it. When he did, he launched an attack on everyone present. At that moment, it was noticed that the defensive weapons were still functioning. Du told him to stop trying to ruin the auction and blaming the guest. One of his subordinates didn't understand what had happened but suggested they leave before it was too late. Thus, the three of them decided to flee. The pink-haired girl concluded that the masked man had spoken to the young blonde on purpose. She wanted to know what tricks he had and how he managed to break the blue light sword. Hours later, wandering through the city, elsewhere was the sealed sword. She noticed she was being followed. Looking around, she realized that the 5 elementals were surrounding her. One of them, Bold, told her that she shouldn't be walking alone late at night. Blanche replied that no one had ever told her that before. It was the first time she had seen something like this. The bald man also warned that it was very unlucky to run into the 5 elementals of all people. After that, a closed-door meeting began. The leader said he could speak freely since everyone there was trustworthy. The masked man began to explain about the monster body. Upon hearing this, the pink-haired girl asked if it was something like alchemy. Her grandfather liked the idea, however, the weapon craftsman still couldn't refine them. Froda, taking advantage of the opportunity, said that, to be honest, he used that star suction ring to collect genes. Hearing this, the redhead wanted to know how just a ring could manage to collect abilities, as it seemed too magical. The old man, all excited, said that he had made some achievements in the field of alchemy. He showed him a brush made of wolf fur, which was a rank D item. The next step was the old man's imprinting process, which involved probing his abilities. Thus, he took that ability for himself as well. Handing the officer back to the old man, he asked him to analyze whether what he was saying was true or not. Taking the material back, he noticed that the ability had indeed been collected, and that this was a great discovery. The pink-haired young woman wanted to know from the protagonist how he would manage the collected genes. He thought that they had finally asked the right question, and now he could explain the concepts behind the ability. He said that the main members of his organization possessed 2 or more abilities. The redhead immediately got excited because that ability genesis could be used in a weapon made from monster materials. To crush the young woman's dreams, the protagonist said that it was a great idea, but impossible. He mentioned that he wanted to ask something to Lord Kingan. He wanted to know if a weapon was made with about 30% of the monster's body. The man then explained that after that, an alchemy collection process was carried out, and that was how they extracted that portion of accumulated activities and used the combined alchemy technique. He said that if the protagonist was interested in the subject, he would be willing to demonstrate the alchemy that took him years to master. Moving on to another location, they were showing the fight of some ability users in the middle of the street. But when one of the users saw that he was being recorded, He had to take action. However, he had no time, as he realized that 3 heroes were approaching. That bald man told Demon Dragon that the 5 elementals had already arrived first. As cordial as ever, Demon Dragon stated that the target was a traitor and belonged to him, not allowing anyone else to lay hands on her. Faster than the enemy's eyes could see, Demon Dragon was already striking the bald man. The entire fight was being televised, showing the exact moment Demon Dragon lunged forward. With his image on the TV screen, many people were sharing their opinions about him. The 5 elementals were planning to surround and trap him. After attacking the bald man, Demon Dragon ensured that there would be one less opponent. Now it was the red-haired young woman's turn. The power difference between them was immense, but she didn't want to lose, so she tried to flee. However, she felt herself being captured. Demon Dragon showed no mercy to anyone and would not let those young women escape. Looking at the sealed sword, he stated that soon it would be her turn. Elsewhere, Demon Dragon's youngest brother was watching the fight on TV. The young woman accompanying him said that he didn't need to worry so much about his brother. In reality, he was only concerned about informing the leader about what was happening with Blanche. However, the young woman beside him insisted that he shouldn't worry. She asked him to wait a moment as she went to the bathroom. In truth, he wanted to share the news with his godfather, so he entered the mental world. When he arrived, he reported what was happening and took the opportunity to ask if Blanche was a member of the organization and Snake's girlfriend. The protagonist asked him not to pay attention to rumors, as Snake was already an older man, so young Liu assumed it was more of a father-daughter relationship or something like that. He also agreed to keep it a secret to avoid influencing the organization's course. The protagonist thanked him and said he would send someone to assist the sealed sword. He bid farewell to his godfather, saying he would return to continue watching the fight. Now alone, the protagonist thought that he could grant Dragon 2 more elemental abilities, earth control as well as wind control, for his clone named Dragon. He quickly went to find the sealed sword. Meanwhile, at the fight's location, Demon Dragon was charging toward her, demanding that she call the organization's members. She warned him not to waste time with useless words. If he wanted to fight her, then he should come, but since he refused to make things easier, she had no other choice. However, that woman was not as weak as she seemed. She managed to block and even counterattack, catching Demon Dragon off guard. After inflicting the injury, the woman with the sword leaped away. She also noticed that helicopters were filming everything that was happening, and he could see that the drone recording the fight had been affected and destroyed. Demon Dragon kept saying that if she didn't call Yuji, he would make her life even more difficult. After hearing him, she ordered him to shut up. Demon Dragon couldn't contain his rage and lunged at her. However, the young woman activated her powers and created a barrier. Even so, Demon Dragon wasn't making things easy for her. She pushed herself to the limit to keep the barrier active. Since the drones were no longer working, someone went in person to report what was happening. After managing to break the barrier, Demon Dragon grabbed the young woman by the neck. Even so, she assured him that she wouldn't say anything. Losing patience, he threw her against a wall. She was visibly exhausted. The commentators thought that after that blow, she might no longer be able to stand. The fight was still being televised and shown to the spectators. Blanche remained in the same spot where she had been thrown. The heroine placed the explosives and asked Demon Dragon to stop. Her swordsman friend shared the same opinion. However, Demon Dragon didn't like seeing her friends trying to protect the traitor. Contrary to everyone's expectations, she managed to get up. Even though she was trembling, she told him to stop wasting time with words and that they could resume the fight immediately. Naixui thought that this girl had once sacrificed herself for humanity. Meanwhile, the fight continued, as Demon Dragon was tired of hearing her say she didn't care about death. So he attacked with everything he had, but he was caught off guard when a massive water monster appeared before him. Inside the monster were the young woman and the newest member of the Judgment Organization. The comments were that the girl really was a traitor. She wanted to confront that man, asking why they were spreading false news. However, Dragon told her that if she wanted to stay alive, she had no choice but to join their organization. Still, Demon Dragon wanted to know what was going on and why Yujai hadn't appeared yet. The protagonist, wearing Dragon's mask, asked why that man was trying to belittle him. Quickly, he created an attack using massive water hands, which slowly tried to compress Demon Dragon between them. Waiting, the protagonist told the young man to try to withstand the next attack. Without knowing what was coming, Demon Dragon just stopped to face the new strike. But he was shocked when he looked up and saw a giant water hand. That truly seemed to be the end of that hero. While all of this was happening with the clone, Dragon's mask, the protagonist's main body was still at the Chan mansion. He was walking. At one point, he positioned himself behind a tree. He seemed to be looking for something. That's when he pulled a book from his pocket. He remembered that it was old Kion who had lent it to him for a while. It was a journal with records that should be invaluable. Seeing that the masked man was interested, the old man said he could take it and keep it for a while. The protagonist thanked him, saying that the writings in the notebook were truly fascinating. Now looking at the notebook under that tree, he knew it contained a mysterious code. The The elder hadn't been able to notice it because it required a greater power. Having that power, the protagonist could perfectly read what was written. It was something related to the past of someone who had accidentally ended up on the blue planet. This person discovered the presence of the legendary Philosopher's Stone. It was a treasure capable of making anyone extraordinary. It was written that whoever deciphered the code would have the chance to find the Philosopher's Stone that had been hidden on that planet. It was a kind of gift left for humanity, to prevent them from becoming slaves to other beings. This made the protagonist reflect. He believed that the white light was the key he needed to use to find the Philosopher's Stone. It seemed that other worlds were prepared to explore that planet. After everything, he took off, flying over his metallic base. Elsewhere, the protagonist's girlfriend was still watching what was happening with Demon Dragon and the new masked member of the judge organization. She was still talking about the new person when a masked figure appeared in front of her. Seeing that this startled his girlfriend, he asked her to stay calm. Looking at the drone, he introduced himself as Dragon, one of the Zodiac members of the judge organization. He tried to be polite, saying there was no need to be afraid since he only upheld justice. As soon as he said that, everyone heard a massive explosion. Dragon was in his final form. It was a rank 3 transformation girling. For that reason, he asked his girlfriend, who was by his side, to leave that place as it was no longer safe. Both she and, as if she didn't know him, flew away to deal with that out-of-control hero. Niku just watched as he departed. Now that Demon Dragon was in his 4th form, he had lost his consciousness. The masked dragon was there, atop a massive water monster to prevent any attacks. He also created a giant stone palm that moved toward the dragon. To defend himself, Demon Dragon began biting the enormous hand. However, he realized that his strength was not enough to hold back that palm. Meanwhile, at young Liu's house, he was watching everything on TV and thought that the guy called Dragon seemed to be his age. His companion asked if he didn't feel like the place had suddenly gotten cold. When the young man looked up, he noticed that his house had no roof. She was shocked because Demon Dragon, with just one strike, had almost eliminated them both. It was clear that this battle was taking place near young Liu's residence. Meanwhile, Demon Dragon continued biting the stone hand. When he leaped to go higher, a massive rock was about to fall on the young woman. She merely closed one eye, unwilling to witness her own end. But once again, she was saved by a member of that organization. She simply looked up and thanked the one wearing the dragon mask. The protagonist knew that the destructive power of that guy was a serious problem. He needed to finish that fight as quickly as possible. However, the swordsman Ali tried to cut through the water flow with his sword. After attempting, he stated that he was waiting for the right moment to catch that man off guard. When his wind-chasing sword didn't achieve much success, the commentator speculated that to break through Dragon's defense, the wandering swordsman wouldn't care about the consequences. Dragon's defense was very weak at that moment. If someone else attacked, it could be the end. However, Dragon was trying to protect an innocent reporter from their team. Rushing toward the masked man, the young heroine explosive fists went all out. She thought she could handle it with just one punch. However, exhausted, she said she would leave the rest to Demon Dragon. The reporter saw when the Guardian of the Sea was wounded due to the teamwork of the 3 heroes. She also saw when the masked hero leaped forward, activating his scythe ability. With that, he managed to strike Demon Dragon in his 4th form. Charging ahead, he aimed to finish that attack. Through Demon Dragon's eyes, the masked man was perceived as a definite threat, landing the strike right in the middle of Demon Dragon's chest. Why did the protagonist use earth power specifically against me? A giant hand was formed from stone, gripping the dragon's torso. No matter how much he growled, the hand still held him tight. After everything, he was thrown to the ground, ending his transformation. Knowing that he was being televised and having already defeated both Demon Dragon and the Wandering Swordsman, the masked dragon man told Ji Zhang that he needed to make a choice, and he already knew what he wanted in return. Demon Dragon's father, watching the scene from his office, trembled with rage, so much so that he shattered the glass he was holding. However, the journalist didn't quite understand whether the father had to choose between Demon Dragon or the Wandering Swordsman. Before long, the man appeared, bringing the hero Bing Chan with him. In the sky, he was accompanied by that hero. He remembered the deal he had made with the masked man about exchanging that hero in return for an extra ability. The man told the masked figure that they would proceed with the trade as per the original plan. However, the hero had no idea when his boss had struck such a deal with that person. That hero knew that accepting being traded for 2 rank A heroes was a tough situation. The leader took a liking to the young man. However, it was all a ploy for him to escape afterward, which led nowhere as he was sliced apart while trying to flee. that left the commentator, the reporter, and even the young Flammer Butterfly in shock. At the company, young Liu watched the fight from a distance. Flammer Butterfly couldn't understand why that young man was celebrating as if he had won a prize. The hero who had been cut down didn't understand why his master had done that to him. However, he simply grabbed the body and hurled it at Dragon's feet. Lying on the ground, he said that he had no resentment toward that person and didn't know why he was being targeted for elimination. However, that had nothing to do with the leader, who simply received everything with his metallic tentacles. He also mentioned that he had already removed that person from his team and company. Now the rest was up to the masked man. Angry, the hero didn't understand what was happening. However, a strange ability was activated. Frustrated, that hero asked how he should repay them for the favor.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.